Welcome to the audio read-aloud of Christmas Creeps from the Deep, a comedy sci-fi horror creature feature by DM Guay, which is me. Yep, I'm the author, and I'll be reading it to you today, so let's get to it.
Chapter 1, A Christmas Wish for a Big Fish. All Skeeter Snow wanted for Christmas was to catch a really big fish. Like really, really big. He had a brand new smoker in his backyard and the dang thing was empty. It wasn't for lack of trying. Skeeter had been ice fishing every night for the past week, but somehow managed to catch zilch. Zero. Nothing. Not even a bite. He'd never had a run of luck this bad in his whole life. He was starting to think something had scared all the fish out of Holiday Lake. That or he was cursed. Probably cursed the way today's going. He huffed as he slipped off his Owl's Food and Stuff apron and his reindeer headband with the jingle bells between the antlers, the standard Christmas uniform. Skeeter's legs ached from 10 hours of running back and forth between the meat case and sporting goods, covering for Roger Schmidt. He and his no-good brother Ricky had no-call, no-showed. The jerks were probably sleeping off a bender in their ice fishing shack. Again. Well, Skeeter was going to give those two a piece of his mind the second he got out there. Of course, he'd have to make it to the time clock first, which wasn't going to be easy. Only 2,000 people lived in Holiday Lake, but every last one of them seemed to be in the store right now, grabbing their last-minute Christmas hams and stocking stuffers. The checkout line snagged up and down every aisle. Register 2 sat dark, unopened thanks to Ricky. Maddie Pickens couldn't keep up, even though she was the fastest cashier in Al's history. She wielded her scanner gun like a Wild West quick draw, ringing whole carts in under 3 minutes, wind blowing through her dyed red feathered hairdo as she went. But even that wasn't fast enough. Not today. Skeeter rushed past her, avoiding eye contact. He hated to leave her in a lurch, but if he was going to have fish for Christmas dinner, he had to go. This was his last chance to catch a big one. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve and the Holiday Lake Christmas Lights Festival, and he was working a double shift. So he stood up straight, furrowed his brows like he was deep in thought, and made a run for the time clock, praying Al didn't pop up out of nowhere and ask him to stay late. Again. He wasn't worried about the customers. Years of retail taught him that if he walked fast and stared at a spot on the far wall like he was in the middle of something important, no one would stop him. Even Granny Boyd let Skeeter walk past, and she always asked him for something. She'd been shopping at Al's for 50 years and still didn't know where to find things. She eyed Skeeter for a second, then turned back to Granny Pickens. The two of them stood at the end of aisle 2. Granny Pickens held a shopping bag over her arm filled to the brim with ammo. Skeeter knew because he'd just sold it to her. She whispered something to Granny Boyd. All Skeeter caught was "just in case," then reached into her bag and handed her a box. Skeeter wondered if grannies everywhere bought as much ammo as they did here, or if it was just a Northwoods thing. He didn't wonder enough to dally, though. He was nearly at the time clock, and he was almost home free. He rounded the aisle 1 end cap and grabbed his time card off the rack. 1 punch and it was fishing time. 1 punch and he was free. His day was finally looking up, until Granny Frost rolled over his foot with her wheelchair seconds before his time card hit the puncher. Ow! Skeeter grabbed his foot and squeezed, hoping the pain would go away. It didn't. And worse, he dropped his time card. It fluttered away in slow motion like a cosmic joke. Yep, he was cursed. Quit pouting, Skeeter. No one's working sporting goods and I ain't leaving without my ammo, Granny Frost said. It's the same order every year. 12 gauge, 3 boxes, pick up on December 23rd. You didn't forget, did ya? This is an emergency. Oh, I didn't forget. He didn't, but Roger did. That no-good no-show hadn't filled her order or anyone else's. The pickup shelf behind the counter was empty, and Skeeter didn't have time to do it while he was working 2 stations. But he didn't dare say that to Granny Frost. Rumor was she kept a gun tucked in her wheelchair under that plaid blanket she kept over those skinny sticks she called legs. Grannies. Skeeter wondered if they started out crazy or if they ripened into it with old age, like bad bananas. He also wondered why Al sold them so many bullets. Skeeter was all for gun rights, but Granny Frost alone bought 3 boxes of shells every December, year in and year out like clockwork since before Skeeter was a gleam in his daddy's eye. That was a lot of bullets, and she didn't hunt. Neither did her weird, sad grandson, Earl. He was a full-grown man who rarely left the house. He was what you'd call indoorsy. Skeeter didn't know why she needed so many, but if zombies or communists ever attack Holiday Lake Red Dawn style, Skeeter might need some of that ammo. Best to keep all the grannies on his good side. So he said, "I'll go in back and see if I can find them." He forced a smile and limped off to the stockroom. It was a jumbled mess of boxes, ripped and stacked and restacked like a wonky Jenga tower. Employees had been digging through quickly, looking for whatever weird things customers asked for, then leaving things where they landed. Worse, Bob Thomas had delivered the New Year's Eve firecrackers early, and he was the worst delivery man in the county. He dumped the pallet smack in the middle of the room, where it was impossible to get around. Skeeter couldn't go back out there with nothing, or Granny Frost would have his hide. So he sucked in his gut and scooted past the pallet. Then he lifted and heaved and moved boxes and dug until he unearthed a single box of shells, in a cardboard box so crunched up it looked like an elephant stepped on it. It was all they had. It would have to do. "We got a delivery coming first thing tomorrow." Skeeter's hand shook with fear as he handed Granny Frost that one sad crumpled box. She wasn't the kind of lady you sent home angry and ammoless. "I'm sure there'll be more in the truck." Her eyes narrowed. Skeeter braced for the worst. Every muscle in his body pulled tight. Then she said, "Thanks, Skeeter. I'll have Earl stop in tomorrow to get the other two. Poor sweet boy hates guns, but he doesn't understand. He doesn't know what's out there." Granny Frost pointed her gnarled stump of a hand at the front window. Skeeter looked, but all he saw was the smiling cartoon snowman painted on the glass. Before he could ask her what she meant, Granny Frost wheeled to the front of the store, cut the line, and smacked 2 fresh bills in Mattie Pickens' hands. The crowd let her cut, 'cause everyone in town was afraid of her. Skeeter shook his head. The Frosts were some weirdos. Granny Frost hated Christmas, and so did Earl. How could anyone grow up in Holiday Lake and hate Christmas? It wasn't natural. Skeeter loved Christmas. He even stopped outside the store for a minute to soak up some of the holiday cheer in the town square before he hopped in his truck. Holiday Lake looked pretty as a postcard, just like one of those snow-capped towns in those Christmas romance movies all the gals around here loved. The smell of fresh gingerbread cookies spilled out of Becky's bakery. Notes of peppermint and hot chocolate mixed in every time the Christmas cafe's door opened. Brand new speakers dotted the town square, filling the air with that bouncy Mariah Carey Christmas song with all the high notes. Skeeter hummed along. This was his favorite time of year, even with the double shifts. And he was never in so much of a hurry that he couldn't stop to smell the sugar plums, so to speak. Life was good. He had a case of Ham's beer in his passenger seat, and his best friend Kenny was already out in the fishing shack dropping lines. The only thing missing was the fish, but that was going to change. He was going to catch some big fish tonight. Big ones, he was sure of it. Nothing could bring him down now. Until some jerk slapped a piece of paper in his face. "What the?" Skeeter held it out to see what it was. Big text screamed, "Beware, the end is near," above a weird scribble that looked like a walking sea creature from an old drive-in movie. Earl Frost, Granny Frost's weird grandson, stood in front of Skeeter with a stack of flyers in his hand. Earl had a white robe pulled tight and lumpy over his heavy winter coat. He looked like a crazed white trash sausage about to split his casing. Only thing missing was a tinfoil hat. "Jesus, Earl, what are you wearing? Look at you." "I'm real glad I ran into you, Skeeter," Earl said. "Oh boy." Skeeter braced for whatever was going to pop out of Earl's mouth. It could be anything. He once tried to convince the whole town that Bigfoot and aliens were hanging out in the woods. "Evil fishmen are going to rise up and destroy humanity." Earl grabbed Skeeter's arm, dead serious. "We got to prepare. You're a good guy. I don't want you to die." "I appreciate the thought," Skeeter said, because what else could he say? Earl was a nice guy, but he'd always been gullible. He'd really gone off the rails since he started hanging out with the weirdos down at Bucky's Odds and Ends. Nothing Skeeter said was going to change his mind, although it was Christmas and Skeeter was feeling charitable, so couldn't hurt to try. "Earl, you ever think about getting a new job? I hear they're hiring out at the fracking plant." Skeeter pointed over the water to the other side of the lake. They couldn't see the plant, but the whole town knew it was out there behind the trees. They could see lights at night, and sometimes whatever the hell they were doing out there caused little earthquakes. "Have you thought of applying? A job like that would be good for you, working on a team. You might make some new friends. Better than working alone out there at the gassing stop. Skeeter didn't wait for Earl to answer. Gotta go. I need to get on the lake while the fish are still biting. Skeeter scooted around Earl and stomped toward his truck toward freedom. But Earl called after him. That's what I'm telling you, Skeeter. The fish are biting and they're killers. The great old ones are coming. I sure hope so. I could use some great old ones. Great old walleye, preferably, Skeeter said. He slid into his truck, buckled up, and sped down Main Street. Although Main Street wasn't so much a street as a narrow, winding two-lane highway that hugged the shoreline of Holiday Lake. The town was on one side, the lake was on the other, and it didn't take long to end up in the middle of nowhere. Holiday Lake was small, a mile-long strip of civilization surrounded by dense forest way up north in the ice-cold middle of Northwoods nowhere, which suited Skeeter just fine, except that night came early in December this far north. By the time Skeeter parked his truck next to Ricky's busted-up Ford, the sun had set and the sky was black as pitch. Skeeter grabbed the case of hams off his passenger seat and slid out of his truck, confident his luck was going to change. He had a secret weapon. He dug in his coat pocket and came out with a fish finder. He bought the last one at Al's, an early gift to himself. Sure, it felt a little like cheating, but this year he needed all the help he could get. And thanks to his employee discount, he could afford the nicer model. He flipped it on and set it so it glowed extra bright and beeped extra loud when the fish were near, then stuck it in his back pocket. He wanted it firing on all cylinders when he pulled it out to show Kenny. Skeeter shuffled across the ice to his shack. None of the lights were on. Even Ricky and Roger's shack, not too far from theirs, were dark. He knew those jerks were still out here. He saw their truck, and there was no way they'd sucked the battery packs dry already. Skeeter had just charged them all. I bet they're sleeping it off again. Probably woke up and started day drinking, and this is blackout number 2. Skeeter's jaw clenched. He couldn't wait to give those deadbeats a piece of his mind. Skeeter's shack was pitch black and ice cold inside. We've been over this, buddy. You can fire up the heater, take the chill off. Propane tank's full, he said. Why are you sitting here in the dark? We got lights. Skeeter could just make out Kenny's outline sitting in his lawn chair with his chin on his chest, asleep. Skeeter's eyes shot to the pyramid of beer cans they kept by the door, or rather, the space where the cans should be. They were all gone. Damn it, Kenny. Did you let Roger and Ricky drink all our beer? You know those jerks hung me out to dry today. Which reminds me, I'm going to go rip 'em a new one. Be back in a minute. Skeeter dropped the case of hams by the door. Then he noticed the hole cut in the ice was bigger. Much bigger, with rough, ragged edges. His old radio was face down in the ice, and the milk crate it sat on was upturned. What were you all doing out here, wrecking the place? He sat his radio back on the crate, plugged it in, and turned it on, but nothing happened. No power. Skeeter pounded the wall to rouse Kenny. Wake up, we got fish to catch. He stepped outside. One of Kenny's strings of Christmas lights, the multicolored ones with the extra big bulbs, Al's Black Friday special, Kenny liked to keep things festive, had been yanked clean off the shack. They lay across the ice surrounded by beer cans that had been sliced to ribbons. The battery pack was upturned. Seriously? Look at this mess. Skeeter righted the battery pack and stuck all the plugs back in. The ice lit up red, green, and blue, and his radio came to life spouting Christmas tunes. His fish finder chirped. He pulled the gadget out of his pocket and watched as a big green blob, a school of fish, moved straight toward him. Well, how about that? Hey, Kenny, get ready. The fish are coming. Finally, Skeeter's luck had changed. He slipped the fish finder in his pocket, then followed a trail of garbage, broken lights, chip bags, and overturned cooler, to Roger and Ricky's shack about 30 feet away. There were frozen, sludgy chunks of what looked like mud across the ice. What the hell is all this? You jerks had quite the party, Skeeter said. I hope it was worth it, because you owe me. I'm taking some of your beer and some of the fish you caught today while I was covering for your drunk asses. Skeeter stepped in the door, face hot with rage, ready to collect. He could see their outlines sleeping it off in the dark. Really? Wake up! Chirps rose from Skeeter's pocket, louder and faster. Hear that? The fish are coming. Get up before we miss 'em. But Ricky and Roger didn't stir. Damn it, wake up! Skeeter kicked Ricky's shin, hoping to shock him awake, but Ricky fell out of the chair and landed face down in the ice instead. He didn't even grunt. Jesus, how much did you drink? Skeeter reached down to grab Ricky's shoulder to flip him over. He liked to look a man in the eye when he gave him the what for, but Skeeter stopped short. A dark puddle pooled around Ricky's head, or, if Skeeter was seeing this right, his lack of a head. In the dark, it looked like a jagged edge of raw flesh, like Ricky's head had been ripped off. Not neat, but rough. torn. That couldn't be right. Skeeter's eyes had to be tricking him in the dark. He fished his phone out of his pocket and shined the flashlight on Ricky. Jesus Christ! Skeeter stumbled and fell hard, landing smack on his tailbone, barely missing the fishing hole. Ricky's head had been ripped off. Roger was slumped in the corner. The front of his coat was wet, dark, and ripped to shreds, and inside, where Roger's chest should be, was nothing but a jagged, bloody hole, oozing guts. Skeeter's heart hit his tonsils until he realized Ricky and Roger were just messing with him. They knew what time he got off work. They knew he'd come right here. They did all this just to scare him, an epic joke, and Kenny was in on it. Why else would they all be sitting out here in the dark? It made sense. Roger had once used a chainsaw to cut a fake arm off Ricky during trick-or-treat. Traumatizing neighborhood kids on Halloween was their favorite hobby, and they were committed. "Ha ha, very funny, you jerk," Skeeter said. "Party's over. Joke's on me. Good work. Now cut it out. It's time to fish." Skeeter stood up. Ricky and Roger didn't. They didn't move at all. "Come on, guys. I said you got me. Real convincing. Don't gloat." He shined the light on Roger. His eyes were open and they were white, dead. And his chest, he stared at it for a good long time, but it didn't move. Roger wasn't breathing. And those guts, they looked awfully real, like something ripped out his inside. Skeeter pressed a finger to Roger's neck. Ice cold. No pulse. His hand shook and his brain buzzed. This was real. They weren't faking. His pocket chirped nonstop. The fish were biting all right, but Skeeter didn't care. He only cared about getting out of here alive before whoever did this to Roger and Ricky came back for him and Kenny. Then it hit him. Oh, God, Kenny! Skeeter shot out of the shack. He sprinted across the ice, but the panic made the ice seem slipperier and made his breath harder to catch. It was the longest 30 feet he'd ever run, but he made it. He clung to the door, breathing hard. "Kenny, someone got Ricky and Roger. We're leaving right now." Skeeter reached for his friend, but tripped. His boot got caught up on a string of Christmas lights. They wrapped around his ankle as he shuffled to his friend. He grabbed Kenny's shoulders and shook. "Come on, we gotta go." Kenny was stiff as a plank. He didn't move. Skeeter shook him again and his head fell off. It hit the ice face up. Kenny's dead white eyes stared up at Skeeter, and then Kenny's coat fell open. He'd been slashed tip to tail, his belly an open wound. Kenny's guts slid out, bubbling down, piling up on top of his own face. No, 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 no. Skeeter's hand shook so hard he could barely get his phone out, let alone dial for help. And suddenly his foot went out from under him and he hit the floor face first. The fish finder fell out of his pocket and skidded across the ice. He rolled over and saw something pulling on the string of Christmas lights around his ankle, something white and scaly. It pulled the lights toward the fishing hole, toward the water. Skeeter didn't know what the hell he was looking at, and the stupid fish finder was beeping so loud he couldn't think straight. So many fish, but Skeeter didn't care. Not anymore. The white thing holding the other end of the lights rose out of the hole. Emphasis on thing. Skeeter had never seen anything like it. It was so white it seemed to glow. It raised a giant hand, 4 fingers and a thumb, but not like a man. They were white, scaly and webbed, with long claws sharp as razors, sharp enough to rip a man's head off or split him tip to tail. Skeeter immediately knew who, or rather what, had killed his best friend. Then a pair of eyes rose out of the water, giant, bulbous, and white. They were attached to a face so horrible Skeeter went a little mad just looking at it. It looked like one of those monster fish you see on the Nature Channel, the ones that live in eternal darkness in the deepest part of the ocean. Its giant mouth was filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth, long as porcupine quills. The back of its head dripped with tentacles, and they were vibrating. It opened its giant, ugly mouth and clicked. Skeeter froze solid with fear. Then the thing smacked a second huge clawed hand onto the ice and heaved itself up through the hole. It had an eerily man-shaped torso, thick as a linebacker and covered in white scales. It dragged itself to the radio, which was tuned into the oldies station 2 towns over. It clawed at the radio, reducing it to sparking electrical bits, until the music fizzled and went silent. The creature clicked and waited as if it were listening. Then it grabbed the strand of Christmas lights looped around Skeeter's ankle and started to sink into the hole, into the dark water of Holiday Lake. Skeeter saw his own terrified reflection in those 2 giant, bulbous, horrible eyes as the thing sunk down, and something in him snapped. This thing had killed his best friend. This thing was a killer. He couldn't let it go. He had to stop it. It had to pay. Skeeter grabbed hold of the light string and yanked. The thing rose up out of the water, just a bit, just enough. Skeeter scrambled to his feet. He looped the light string around the creature's neck like a noose, then pulled as hard as he could. The thing hissed and clawed at him, trying to free itself, but Skeeter held on tight, dodging razor-sharp claws. Then he planted his boot directly in its face. "That's for Kenny, asshole!" The thing stopped moving, stunned for a split second. Then it hissed and clicked and tried to escape down into the water. Skeeter held on to the lights around that thing's neck so tight they cut into his hands. "I don't think so, fish man. We hunt you, not the other way around." He brought his boot down on that thing's head, hard, again and again and again, over and over until its big bulbous eyes bled green. The thing thrashed and pawed, hissing and carrying on. It tried really hard to save itself, but Skeeter stomped his boot down on its face over and over until it was dead. Then he stomped his boot down one more time just to be sure, right between those giant white eyes. He hit it so hard he went ankle deep in fish face. The shack fell silent. Apart from the chirp of the damn fish finder, it beeped loud, constant, like there was a massive school under his feet. Skeeter pulled his boot out of the fish thing's skull and stared at it for a long time, just to be sure it was dead, just to give his brain time to believe what his eyes were seeing. A big, fat, white fish man, with thick scales and a face lined with spiky teeth. And then it hit him. Earl Frost was right. God damn. Skeeter never thought he'd say that, but Earl Frost was right. There were killer fishmen in the lake, and everyone in town needed to know it. They needed to know what killed Kenny and Ricky and Roger. Skeeter fished his phone out of his pocket again. He needed photo evidence because no one was going to believe this. But before he could tap the screen, he hit the ice, hard. All the air went out of him, and his phone skittered away, thunking to a stop by poor dead Kenny's gut-covered head. Skeeter sat up. The creature was sinking down into the water fast, and the light string around Skeeter's ankles pulling him down with it. He grabbed the string and tried to untangle it from his ankle, but it was on there tight. Then something yanked hard. Skeeter flew across the ice. Crunch! Pain shot through him, so intense he vomited. He had one leg in the hole up to the hip, with the joint crunched backward the wrong way. "Rip!" Skeeter screamed. His leg came out of the water. What was left of it? It was a jagged stump, ripped off at the knee. Blood sprayed the ice, spurting with every beat of Skeeter's heart. He grabbed the bleeding stump and squeezed, but the bleeding didn't stop. Thunk! Something hit the ice underneath him hard. Cracks spread around him like fault lines. It hit again and again, with so much force the shack shook. Then the ice split and Skeeter plunged into the freezing water. He drew in a long breath and grabbed for anything and everything to keep him from sinking, until claws sunk into his back like hooks, and Skeeter knew that breath had been his last. Something pulled Skeeter down. In the glow of the red and green Christmas lights, Skeeter saw the ice floor of his fishing shack floating in chunks above him, the body of his best friend falling into the water, and then he saw eyes. Dozens of them, white, bulbous, huge. That creature wasn't alone. Dozens of them swam in angry circles around him. Others clawed at the lights, ripping them to shreds, until everything went black. Skeeter was out of air and out of hope, but with the few precious seconds he had left, Skeeter prayed, "Lord, if you can hear me, put lots of bullets on that delivery truck tomorrow, and please give Earl Frost the strength to send these critters back to hell where they belong, just like he said he would. You can't let these monsters ruin Christmas. Amen." Then Skeeter breathed in the icy water. He let it fill his lungs. He didn't fight it. Not that he had a choice. But he let his one precious life leave his body, knowing drowning was a mercy. Because whatever these monsters were going to do to him down here, he didn't want to be alive to see it. Chapter 2. A Day in the Life of Earl Frost, amateur fish enthusiast, freshly minted cult member. Earl Frost stood outside of Al's Food and Stuff, waving his last flyer at every person who walked by, praying they would take it so he could go home. The end is near. He held it out to Darlene Stump, who gave him the side-eye and walked away. "Monsters are coming to kill us all." He held it out to Artie Sweeney, who ran the muffler shop on Logan Street. He walked past Earl like he was invisible. "Seriously? I'm trying to help you." Earl was desperate. His mouth was drier than a cactus bud, and his back ached from standing. He'd been out here for 6 hours. He never dreamed it would take this long to hand out his last 10 flyers. Not on Christmas Eve, not when the town square was packed earmuff to earmuff with people. But most folks made a wide berth around Earl, or turned tail and ran when he spoke. It didn't make a lick of sense. If the end of the world were coming, Earl would sure as hell want to know about it. Plus, there was a 20% off coupon for Bucky's Odds and Ends on the back. Who'd say no to a coupon in this economy? Earl was still puzzling it out when someone walked up and said, "What you got there? Can I see it?" Earl perked up, re-energized, until he saw Sheriff Ed shooting him a look that could melt an iceberg. He snatched the flyer out of Earl's hand, looked at it, and shook his head. "We've been over this, Earl. Monsters aren't real and nothing's going to attack Holiday Lake. Not on my watch," he said. "This is the Bigfoot and aliens incident all over again. I thought we moved past this. But nothing." Sheriff Ed cut him off. "Handing out unapproved flyers is illegal, but I'm going to let it slide because I know Christmas is hard for you with the anniversary of your daddy's drowning and all. But if you do it again, I will fine you." "But monsters are coming. They're going to destroy the world, starting with Holiday Lake," Earl said. "Look around." Sheriff Ed grabbed Earl by his cult robe and turned him towards Becky's bakery. Ted and Fred Rowland danced around outside in giant foam gingerbread man costumes, icing faces drawn in perpetual smiles, taking selfies with kids. The mayor had installed a high-end sound system this year to flood the town square with nonstop holiday music. People were singing along, walking to the beat of the music as they shopped. It's Christmas. People are happy. Why don't you go shopping, get in the spirit, enjoy life a little like everyone else, like a normal person, for once," Sheriff Ed said. "It's been more than 20 years since you lost your daddy. Maybe it's time to move on." Earl took one look at the people rushing from store to store, arms loaded with shopping bags, smiling, sipping hot chocolate, and felt a stabbing pain in his heart. Move on? He couldn't. Not when 20 years still felt like yesterday. But he couldn't say that out loud. So he said, "I'm not sure the mayor's fancy new sound system is the best use of our taxpayer dollars. No man should have to listen to Mariah Carey hitting the high note on repeat. It makes my head hurt." Sheriff Ed huffed. "There's just no cheering you up, is there? Look, if you want to be the Scrooge of Holiday Lake forever, that's your choice. But you're done bumming everyone else out, you hear? It's bad for business. Now get out of here before I change my mind and give you a ticket." Sheriff Ed shooed Earl off, but he kept the flyer, which was a relief. Bucky's instructions were clear. Earl wasn't allowed to set foot in Bucky's Odds and Ends until he'd given every last one away, no matter how long it took. Bucky was adamant, because the town was in danger and they had to get the word out. That and Bucky was banking on that coupon reversing his retail fortunes. Earl wasn't so sure 20% off was enough, though. Bucky's Odds and Ends was a 2-bit junk shop in a single-wide trailer on the edge of town. People didn't line up there to buy gifts, or buy much of anything at all. Bucky's was considered an eyesore, a pimple on the town butt. But tonight, that changed. Bucky's was going to be the epicenter of something way more important than stocking stuffers. Earl and the gang were going to perform a ritual there that just might save Holiday Lake and the world. But first, Earl had to pick up Granny's ammo. Showing up back home without those bullets would be a death sentence. Some people had ham for Christmas. Granny had bullets. That was the tradition, and Earl didn't dare break it. So he stepped inside Al's Food and Stuff, full of purpose, and someone immediately yelled, "Hey everybody, did you hear? Earl Frost says monsters are coming. It's the end of the world." No, wait. False alarm. The Scrooge of Holiday Lake is just trying to bum us all out for Christmas. Again. It was Craig Miller, one of Earl's 3 lifelong bullies. Chip, Craig, and Carl. The 3 C's. They'd been beating Earl up physically and emotionally since they rode the bus together in 1st grade. People in the checkout line shook their heads and rolled their eyes at Earl, including old Mr. Hanson, who owned the dairy aisle on Elm Street, and Mattie Pickens, the cashier with the teal eyeshadow and the dyed red hair helmet that hadn't changed shape or color since she started working here back in the 90s. And worse, Craig pushed his cart, filled with Christmas ham and light strings, out of the checkout line and right up to Earl. "I think I saw one of your fish monsters last night. He was in the woods having a beer with Bigfoot. Same place you saw that flying saucer," he said. "What are you waiting for? Go out there and get him." Craig laughed, and so did everyone else. Earl's cheeks burned. "They're out there. You'll see. Same old Frost. Ain't never gonna change. You try to have a Merry Christmas, Earl, you hear?" Craig clapped him on the back, then wheeled his cart out the door. Earl turned and ran down the main aisle. He couldn't get away from everyone snickering and rolling eyes fast enough. They didn't understand. Earl wasn't trying to ruin Christmas. Not this year, not any year. He was trying to save them. He wasn't a Scrooge. He just couldn't muster the holiday spirit like other people. He had his reasons, and they were good reasons. Earl moved so fast he was out of breath when he made it to Sporting Goods. Granny Anderson stood at the counter, tapping her wrinkled fingers on the glass display case. "Can you believe this? They don't have a single person working back here today of all days. Don't they know this is urgent?" Her wrinkled lips were pursed so tight they looked like a cat's business end. "You here to get Marge's bullets?" "Sure am," Earl said. Granny Anderson was part of the Misty Pines Trailer Park Thursday night knitting club. Granny was president. They'd been meeting at Granny and Earl's place for years. Earl didn't know why. He'd never been allowed in a single meeting, but they all bought an awful lot of ammo. Just then, a teenager with a pink carpet of angry pimples on both cheeks slid behind the sporting goods counter with a stack of ammo boxes in his hand. "'Bout time. What took you so long?" Granny Anderson opened her purse and slid some crisp bills across the counter. Zit Kid shrugged as he plinked some buttons on the register. "Bunch of guys didn't show up today." "Anyone check on him?" Zit Kid shrugged. "I heard 2 boys from the fracking plant went missing a few days ago, too." She tapped the ammo. "You might want to take some of these home with you tonight, son. You stay alert, you hear me? Both of you." Her tiny eyes narrowed, dead serious, darting between Zit Kid and Earl. Then she scooped up her bullets and her change and hobbled toward the exit. Zit Kid rolled his eyes and started to walk away. I'm here to pick up an order for Marge Frost," Earl said. Zit Kid glanced at the empty pickup order shelf, then deflated like a balloon with a pinhole in it. "Fine, be right back." He shuffled off really slow, like really, really slow. "Can you hurry? I got someplace to be," Earl said. Zit Kid didn't speed up. At all. At this rate, Earl was going to be late for saving the world. Earl huffed and turned around, hoping to lean back on the counter and rest for a bit. Instead, he immediately filled with a terror so intense it made his stomach tie in a knot. A dozen bulging, desperate eyes stared at him. Goldfish. The fancy kind with the big, wrinkly brain heads. The poor things sat in cups barely big enough to hold an onion, let alone a sentient being. They were on the clearance rack, wedged between 75% off Thanksgiving turkey butter molds and a bunch of Bluetooth speakers with little disco balls on top. And worse, most of them were dead. Those who weren't prayed for sweet relief. They floated in filthy water with nothing to eat, no hope of a water change. Ignored. Earl's initial terror turned to rage. He picked the 2 still living fish off the rack and tucked them gently in the crook of his arm. "Hang on, fellas. I got a nice big tank at home. Plenty of room for you," he whispered. "Don't you worry. I won the first place Rosette ribbon in 4-H aquatic science at the county fair 4 years in a row. I'll take good care of you." "Earl Frost, is that you? What are you doing over there?" Earl filled with a different kind of terror. Holly Green smiled at him, and he didn't know what to do or say. Just looking at her made Earl weak in the knees. She was a curvy, big-bottomed beauty with bottle blonde hair and lips coated in that pink frosty chapstick that smelled like bubble gum. She was so pretty Earl swore a halo of golden light shone down on her at all times, like the clouds had parted and God himself had sent one of his angels down to earth. Holly lived next door to him, in a Barbie pink trailer she'd inherited from her grandma. It wasn't Barbie pink when she moved in. She spent the last 2 summers painting and gardening, turning that place into a palace. All the while, Earl dreamed of fanning her with a palm leaf while she sat on her pink velour sofa, maybe even feeding her one of those snack cakes that looked like a Christmas tree that she loved so darn much. So naturally, Earl professed his undying love by saying, "I'm buying bullets, then I gotta run. My buddies and I are performing a ritual tonight that will save the town from the horrific monsters from the dark dimension who plan to destroy the world." "Ha! You're a hoot, Earl Frost, an absolute hoot," she said. "I swear I never know what's going to come out of your mouth. I meant, what are you doing with those fish? You saving those poor things?" Earl nodded. "I can't leave them to die. It's cruel. Fish have feelings too, you know." "Aw, that is so kind. You're sweeter than sugar, Earl Frost. Do you know that?" She always said his full name, and every time it rolled off her lips, it made Earl tingle head to toe. "I see you fussing with your fish tanks when I look out my window. You should invite me over sometime. Introduce me to your little friends." "Why don't you invite me over and I'll introduce you to my little friend?" Chip Brolin, leader of the 3 C's, smiled at Holly with big blinding veneers, both index fingers pointing at his crotch. "No thanks." Holly shot him a look. The jerk had seemingly materialized out of nowhere. No surprise. He blended in with the holiday decor. Chip was dressed like a mean Christmas elf. Green suit, red scarf, light-up reindeer antlers. Chip turned his attention to the goldfish. Are these the big scary fish monsters you've been warning everyone about? Man, they're ugly. They aren't ugly, Earl said. Seriously, Earl, I gotta ask, what's with the flyers? Why would you hand those out? Are you dead set on casting a shadow over the holiday year after year? Gotta hand it to you, though. Fish Monsters is a new one, Chip said. You know, you've been a Scrooge so long, I'm starting to think it's a Christmas tradition around here. Holly raised an eyebrow. That isn't very nice, Chip. You know this time of year is hard for him. Give him a break. You're right, Holly. Know what? You just gave me an idea. As president of the Civic Association and captain of the Holly Jolly Carolers Club, it's my duty to spread cheer to everyone, Chip said. So tell you what, Earl, I'm adding your trailer to the Carolyn route tonight. We don't normally go to that part of town, but you need cheering more than everyone else. He flashed his sharky teeth, then winked at Holly. Of course we'll stop by your place, Holly. I'm available to cheer you up anytime you need it. No thanks. I'm full up on cheer. Her voice was flat and cold, which made Earl's heart soar until the earth shook under his feet. Literally. All the shoppers gasped and looked around. Holly grabbed Earl's arms. Jars and cans buzzed on the shelves, and then it was over. Oh no, it's those monster fish. They're coming to get us, right, Earl? Ha ha. Chip punched Earl's arm too hard. That's the fracking plant, and you know it, Holly said. I swear those tremors are getting worse. Oh, Holly, don't tell me you're one of those tree huggers, blames everything on fracking. No need to get your panties in a bunch. The CEO of the gas company came here personally last year to tell us how safe it all was. He even had charts, Chip said. Holly rolled her eyes. Then the Zit Kid walked up and dropped 2 boxes of shells in Earl's hand. Well, I'll be. Miracles never cease. Earl, did you finally turn into a real man and take up hunting? I never thought I'd see the day, Chip said. Zit Kid said, they're for his granny. Chip burst out laughing. Should have known Earl Frost didn't have it in him. Even your granny's tougher than you. Classic Frost. Fire rose in Earl's cheeks, intense. Chip had humiliated him in front of Holly, and that was the line. Suddenly, a new feeling rose inside Earl, something he didn't recognize. Resolve. He stood up stick straight, stomped to the sporting goods counter, dug the crumpled up bills Granny had given him out of his back pocket, and smacked them down next to the register. He said in a loud, firm voice, This is for the bullets, but I'm taking the fish for free because you already killed most of them. You all shouldn't sell fish if you aren't going to take care of them. They have feelings too, you know. Zit Kid said, We don't sell fish. Yes, you do. Earl pointed to the clearance rack. Zit Kid took one look at the cups of dead goldfish and said, Ew. They need food, clean water, and a safe place to live just like we do. It's not that hard, Earl said. Then he stormed out of there as fast as his chubby legs would carry him. Holly called after him, but Earl didn't hear what she said. He was laser-focused on one thing and one thing only. He was going to save Holiday Lake. He didn't care what he had to do. He was going to do it. He'd show them. They'd see. Then no one would ever laugh at him ever again. Chapter 3. The Cult of Bucky. Earl stepped in the anemic circle of light cast by the dirty yellow bug bulb on Bucky's front porch, ready to save the world, and immediately shrieked in terror. A green fish with giant fangs stared at him from the darkness. He stopped screaming when he realized it was the 7-foot-tall dusty old statue of the creature of the Black Lagoon Bucky had made out of papier-mâché. It looked like the creature, all right. If his face had melted off then been painted back on by a 3-year-old, Bucky wasn't much of an artist. Usually that thing stood guard over Bucky's collection of old horror movies on VHS, but now it was sitting on a boat trailer near the road. Probably for attention. Bucky was desperate for customers, and that ugly thing would turn a few heads and cause a few car crashes as people drove downtown to the big Christmas light festival. Speaking of Christmas, monsters were coming. Now was not the time to dally. Earl stepped into Bucky's odds and ends full of purpose. Well, as full of purpose as he could be in an old 1970s single-wide that had been converted into a junk shop piled high with stuff, mostly old porn, that smelled like filterless cigarettes. Bucky's trailer was the same make and model Earl and Granny shared. It even had the same wood paneling and wall-to-wall gold shag carpet. But Bucky's front room was filled with boxes of old nudie mags and other junk, stacked floor to ceiling, with only a narrow walkway to scooch through. There wasn't a shopper in sight. So much for that coupon. Earl sucked in his gut, squeezed between the boxes of old leg shows and wee magazines, the thousands of old horror movies on VHS tapes stacked up everywhere, and the dusty displays filled with old movie props and weird religious statuary from other cultures. He didn't mind the clutter, the smut, or the weird gods staring at him. Being part of this cult, planning to save the world, this was the first time Earl had ever felt accepted, like he had finally found people who understood him. This was the first time he had real-life friends, too. Mostly he had just chattered with other fish keepers in the amateur aquarist forum online. And now he and the gang were about to do real good in the world. What more could a man want? Earl was so excited he nearly knocked over the rack of vintage Seika movies, porn, on VHS of course, when he stepped into the hallway. Bucky had converted the master bedroom and back into a secret meeting room. He also hosted illegal poker games on Fridays, which is how he kept the lights on and paid the taxes, but Earl had never been invited to those. He made his way down the hall to the door, but when he reached for the knob, he saw a green smudge on the collar of his white robe. Algae from fussing with his fish tank, saving those poor goldfish he got at Al's. Dang it! He tried real hard to keep this stupid robe clean. It wasn't easy with all the dirty snow and road salt this time of year. He even held it up around his waist when he walked the 3 miles from Misty Pines. But nope, still dirty. Earl licked his finger and wiped the stain. The spot got bigger and greener. Double dang it! He heard a voice on the other side of the door. Short, clipped, intense. It was Kyle with a C. He sounded upset. Probably because his parents didn't spell his name with a K like normal people. They could have saved him a lifetime of spelling out his name over and over, but nope. That was enough to make any man crabby. Or maybe Kyle with the C was just nervous. Made sense. Earl was nervous. This was their first time doing a real magic ritual, but when hell came to Holiday Lake, ordinary men like them needed to step up and do their part. At least that's what Bucky said the night he came into the gas and stopped for $5 on pump 2 and a handful of monster meat sticks and ended up recruiting Earl to the cause. Earl didn't need much convincing. Everything Bucky said made perfect sense, given his own daddy's mysterious death. Bucky said the world was full of mysteries humans didn't understand. Earl knew this in his heart, but it was nice to hear someone else say it. Then Bucky showed him the scale. White, iridescent like a pearl under the gas and stop fluorescent lights. It was too big and too thick to belong to any fish native to these parts, and unlike any Earl had ever seen or studied. This was all the proof Earl needed. He already knew something was lurking out there in the water, and he'd known it since the day his daddy died. Grown men didn't just up and drown in lakes topped with 7 inches of ice. Unfortunately, the algae on his collar didn't budge, so he just had to hope a little stain wouldn't ruin the magic. Earl opened the door. It ain't right, we can't kill... Kyle with a C stopped talking and looked at Earl. So did Earl's fellow World Savers/cult members, Jethro, Bucky, Chester, and Chester's cousins, Timmy and Daryl. They all stared at him. Dead silent. The master bedroom/secret meeting room/illicit poker parlor had changed. The center was clear and empty. All the furniture had been pressed up against the walls and covered in black fabric, and the big glass display case with that weird Predator movie prop spear in it, Bucky's pride and joy, was empty. Bucky had also marked a big circle on the dirty brown shag carpet with duct tape. It had a squiggly design that looked vaguely like an octopus in the middle. Well, as good as you can make one with tape on shag carpet with Bucky's art skills. Well, I'll be. This place looks sharp. You boys really outdid yourselves, Earl said. Why didn't you call me? I could have come early and helped with all this. You're helping us plenty already, Bucky said. Happy to do my part, Earl said. Jethro and Kyle with a C glanced at each other. Bucky stubbed out his Chesterfield cigarette in a big orange clay ashtray shaped like a cartoon alligator, then stepped up to the edge of the circle. His white robe? Gone. He wore a purple satin one with a black sash. They all did. Whew! New uniforms! Guess I didn't need to worry about this stain. Earl pointed to the algae on his chest. You definitely didn't need to worry about that, Bucky said. Chester and his cousins, Timmy and Daryl, chuckled. Is there a new robe around here for me? Earl asked. Don't you worry. I got an extra special outfit for you. Bucky went to a table covered in weird magic stuff and rustled around. Wait a minute. Are those the old choir robes from Holiday Lake Baptist? I saw them at the Advent rummage sale. He must have got a real good deal. Earl was relieved. He couldn't spend another 2 days' pay on a second cult robe. Granny would kill him. Here. Bucky put something very small and red in Earl's hands. Earl stared at it. It looked familiar. Then it hit. Hold on. Are those the slinky panties from that blow-up doll behind the register? You can change in the shitter. Bucky pointed to the dingy yellow bathroom off the master bedroom. Earl looked at it again. A pair of tiny red satin panties, like something the dancers over at the Booby Bungalow would wear. Earl guessed. He'd never been inside. Still, these were definitely way too small and naughty to be something Earl would ever consider wearing. But we're all wearing them under our robes. Isn't that right, boys? Bucky turned to the guys. The guys looked at each other, then nodded, except Jethro and Kyle with the C, who looked at their shoes. Bucky pushed Earl toward the bathroom. But when Earl didn't budge, Bucky's tone changed. Don't question it, son. They're magic underpants like those Mormons wear. You want the magic to work, don't you? Well, of course I do. Who was Earl to question magic? Bucky was the expert. So Earl swallowed his pride, went into the bathroom, and changed. And then he tried real hard not to die of fright right there on the spot when he caught sight of himself in the mirror. Love handles and pot belly hanging over that teeny red pair of satin panties squeezed tight over his unmentionables. It was downright obscene. Thank God they had a bit of stretch in them, or they would have split down the back, which would have been worse. He reminded himself that lives were on the line, and this was a small price to pay to save the town. Then he stepped back out into the meeting room. I'm ready. Can I have that robe now? The room was dark, which was a mercy. No mortal man should have to see him in this outfit. I'll get your robe in a minute. Bucky was the only thing Earl could see. He held a candle under his chin. It was the Dolly Parton prayer candle that he kept by the register that said, May Dolly bless and keep us. Earl crossed himself. Indeed. The flame cast Bucky's fat, wrinkly jowls into deep shadow and made him look like an old-timey movie villain. Bucky had something big and rectangular in his hand. Another art project. It had the same sad, melty face as the papier-mâché creature out front, but this one had octopus tentacles on its head and weird pretend writing around the edges. Oh, did you make those tentacles out of the monster meat sticks I sold you last week? Earl asked. Silence! Don't question me, Bucky said. The design for this bas-relief came to me in a dream. It's a vision from the eldritch gods that sleep, waiting in the other dimension only for me, the one destined to rule over the beasts on this earthly plane. It's crucial to our mission. Earl shrugged. You say so. Bucky pushed Earl into the middle of the taped circle. In the candlelight, Earl could see the other guys standing around the edge staring at him. Earl's hand shot to his crotch. If his mama hadn't left when he was 3, he was pretty sure she would have taught him to be modest and not let anyone see him dressed in a getup like this, unless it was a special lady friend in private with the curtains pulled. Can I get that robe now? I ain't ruining a perfectly good robe, Bucky said. Well, how would we ruin? Lay down on the floor on your back. Bucky pushed Earl down. Okay. Now Earl felt really dirty. Bare skin touching the floor at Bucky's? Not a good idea. Bucky had been a bachelor longer than Earl had been alive, and Earl had never once seen a working vacuum in here. But Earl laid down anyway, because a few moments of shame and carpet lint was a small price to pay to save the world. He couldn't let people die because he was afraid of Bucky's carpet. Right. Bucky sat his sad homemade statue and the dolly candle between Earl's snow boots. Yes, Earl still had on his snow boots. He didn't want to be any more naked than he had to be. Plus, it was bad enough he was lying here in red satin panties. He didn't need everyone to see his big toe poking through the hole in his sock, too. Earl braced the dolly candle between his boots. If it tipped over, all the old shag carpet and dirty mags in here would go up like a blazing inferno. Bucky stepped up to the circle. He had something long and bumpy in his hands. He cleared his throat, which took a minute thanks to all the Chesterfields. Mogwee rally wagnag flum. Bless you, that sounded terrible. You might want to get that checked, Earl said. Dang it, shut up, Earl. This is the chant. Boys, join in, Bucky said. Mogwee rally wagnag flum. All the guys read the chant off papers they were holding, except Earl. Should I be chanting too? I didn't get paper. Shut up and lie still, Earl, or you ruin it, Bucky said. Earl put his head back down. Bucky and the guys said it again. Mogwee rally wagnag flum. Huh, that sounds familiar. Did you get that out of one of those Lovecraft movies we all watched together? Was it the one with that guy from Quantum Leap? Earl said. Oof, have you ever actually read any Lovecraft? Cool monsters, but ooh boy, that guy was a piece of work. Jesus Christ, Earl, shut up, Bucky said. You made me lose my place. Sorry. Granny always said my mouth didn't have an off button, Earl said. All right, fellas, middle of page 1, Bucky said. Gods of the dark, watery realm, hear us. I command you, creatures of the water, hear me, for I am your master now. Huh. Earl scratched his head. Is that from the movie where the green puppet came out of the toilet? What was that one called again? Gremlins? It was Ghoulies, you dumbass, which was way better than Gremlins, and it was made first, so I don't want to hear how it was a copycat. Now, shut up! Bucky said it with a hint of brimstone like a preacher. He got that way about bad movies. Oh, sorry. Earl lay back down and tried to relax. Man, saving the world had a lot of rules. I still like Gremlins better. They were so cute and fuzzy. What was that little guy's name again? Magwee? Wouldn't mind a pet like that. Probably shouldn't, though. I got too many fish tanks. If he fell in, I'd be up to my eyeballs in him like tribbles. That's it. I said, shut up! Bucky stepped up and put a piece of paper over Earl's mouth. Earl really hoped it was a fresh piece because he didn't want to know what kind of lint and dirt had been living on this carpet. It was bad enough lying on it mostly naked wearing red satin panties, but Earl certainly didn't want it near his mouth. Bucky repeated the whole thing from the top, and all the guys chanted along. Gods of the dark, watery realm, hear us. Mogwai Riley Wagdag Flum. I command you, creatures of the water. I am your master on land. Bucky's voice rose. I will lead your watery legions into this world so that we may rule over the earth and all its inhabitants together. To seal this covenant, I offer you this sacrifice to feed your God. Bucky raised the bumpy thing in his hand, and in the light of the dolly candle, Earl saw it was that movie prop dagger Bucky kept in a dusty display case wedged between the first rack of horror VHS tapes and that muddy concrete St. Joseph statue he dug up out of his mom's yard so he could resell it. Hey, is that the Cambodian dagger from that movie you like? Boy, this must be a special occasion. I noticed your Aliens vs. Predator spear is out of the case, too. You never take those out. The boys have been begging you to let them play with those for weeks, Earl said. So much for that tape. It didn't hold. It didn't stand a chance. Bucky huffed. It's a Kandarian demon dagger replica from Evil Dead 2, and none of you assholes can touch my props. You don't play with them. They ain't cheap. This one cost me $200. Now shut up. Hold up. Did you say rule over the earth in that chant? I thought we were banishing the monsters so they couldn't come here. I thought we were saving the earth, Earl said. And what's all this about a sacrifice? Why don't I show you? Bucky's oily nostrils flared with rage. Hold him down, boys. Chester and his cousins, Timmy and Daryl, grabbed Earl's arms and pinned him to the dirty carpet. Jethro and Kyle with the seed looked at each other. Come on, guys. Very funny. But I know that dagger's made of rubber, Earl said. I reinforced it. Bucky turned it, and in the light of the divine dolly candle, Earl could see a glint of metal, a long kitchen knife, zip-tied to the fake bones, and it looked sharp. Earl's brain clicked. Hold up. Are you planning to sacrifice me? For real? Earl wiggled under Chester and his cousins, Timmy and Daryl's grips. Let me go. I didn't sign up for this. Bucky moved in, holding the knife over Earl's chest. Shut up, Earl. It ain't personal. Well, it certainly is personal. Earl tried to wiggle free, but Chester and his cousins Timmy and Daryl were big, burly Northwoods bubbas who'd been working manual labor since they were old enough to walk. Your life is a small price to pay for power and glory and a chance to rule the world, Bucky said. Have you all lost your minds? We can't be the guys who release the evil monsters. We have to be the guys who save everyone, Earl said. We have to be the good guys. Says who? What's being good ever gotten us? Bucky said. Look around. You live in a trailer park with only fish for friends, and I live in a single wide full of old porn. This is my one chance to be on top, and I'm taking it. We're all taking it. Now hold still so we can sacrifice you. I've got a hungry fish god to feed. Chester and his cousins, Timmy and Daryl, pressed Earl into the dirty shag carpet extra hard. Are you guys in on this? Did you guys know Bucky planned to kill me? Earl tried to wriggle free again, but couldn't. The guys all nodded. What did I ever do to you? Earl said. Why me? They looked at each other like they were thinking about it. You're all right, but it's real annoying when you go on about your pet fish, Chester said. Earl's jaw dropped. Proper fish care is important. They depend on us. "What are you so upset about?" Bucky asked. "No one's going to miss you." "That's not true. Who will work nights at the gas and stop?" Bucky shrugged. "Timmy can take those shifts, can't you? He's looking for hours. They cut back his shifts at the plant." Timmy nodded. "That's it. I don't have to take this." Earl sat up straight, but they pushed him right back down. Bucky positioned the knife over Earl's chest, and Earl realized that if he didn't drum up a miracle, this was how his story was going to end. "What if the ritual doesn't work? You'll steal those lines from the movies. You made it all up," Earl said. "What if you kill me for nothing?" I'm willing to risk it," Bucky said. "Can't hurt might help." "It certainly does hurt. It hurts me," Earl said. They didn't let him go. They were going to go through with this. So Earl decided to appeal to their humanity. "Come on, guys, have a heart. You can't let me die before I hit 30. I haven't seen the world. I haven't even told Holly how I really feel about her. And you really can't let me die in a pair of teeny red satin panties that came off a blow-up doll in a crappy 2-bit junk shop." "Hey, who you calling crappy?" Bucky said. "Well, it is," Earl said. "Fair," Bucky shrugged. "See, you have a heart. You can't kill me," Earl said. "Yeah, I can. I want to be rich and have power. At this point, I don't care who I have to kill to get it," Bucky said. "Boys." Chester and his cousins, Timmy and Daryl, held Earl down on the carpet. Apparently, they didn't have a heart, but Earl did, and Bucky was about to sink a movie prop dagger duct taped to a Ginsu knife right into it. Bucky positioned the knife directly over Earl's heart and brought it down quick. Chapter 4. Carolers and Creatures. The next few seconds were a blur. Bucky brought the dagger down. Earl saw a streak of purple. It was Kyle with a C. He hit Chester, then Chester fell into his cousins, Timmy and Daryl, and the three of them flew in all directions like bowling pins. The flying cousins knocked Bucky off balance. The dagger hit Brown Shag, right next to Earl's belly. Kyle with a C was no slim pickings. 6'3" and 250 at least, and thank God, or else Earl would be pinned to Bucky's dirty carpet like a moth in a museum display case. Bucky cursed as he wiggled the dagger back and forth, trying to free it from the carpet. Jethro stepped between Bucky and Earl and said, "Run!" Jethro didn't need to tell Earl twice. Earl kicked. The dolly candle fell over and rolled right into the black drapes covering the furniture. The drapes went up in flames. Bucky let go of the dagger and started stomping on the fire, screaming, "No, my empire!" "Empire, my ass!" Earl shut up and ran for his life, literally. The flames multiplied fast and were so hot by the time he made it to the hallway they nearly fused those red satin panties to his backside. Earl kept running, toppling towers of X-rated junk on his way to the front door. Then he sprinted out into the road and kept running, man bits bouncing. And boy, did he run. And bounce. That pair of tiny red panties could barely contain the jiggling mass of Earl. He prayed to whoever would listen that the fabric would hold together until he got home, because the only thing worse than running for your life from a cult ritual gone wrong wearing nothing but snow boots and tiny red satin panties was running for your life from a cult ritual gone wrong wearing nothing but snow boots. Earl's brain buzzed with the betrayal. He'd been drinking beer and shooting the shit with these guys for weeks. He genuinely thought they were his friends. That was a lie. Now Earl wondered if the monsters in the big white scale were lies too. All those bad movies and filterless cigarettes had muddled Bucky's brain. It didn't matter now. Earl had no choice but to hold tight to the top of those panties and keep running down Main Street in the dark, praying like hell Bucky didn't have enough gas in his 1983 GMC Vandora to run Earl down. He figured the odds were better than 50-50 on that one, since Bucky never put more than $5 worth in the tank at a time. That van was perpetually running on fumes. But gas or not, Bucky would come for Earl. He'd set his house on fire, and Bucky wasn't going to let that slide. So Earl ran faster than he ever had in his life, despite the cramps stabbing his side. He didn't stop. His life was on the line. Plus, if anyone drove by and saw him in these panties, he'd die from embarrassment. Certain death and humiliation were quite the motivators. Earl ran past the faded "Welcome to Misty Pines" sign and was up on his porch, pushing through the front door in record time. He shut the door, locked it behind him, then stopped to catch his breath. Granny snorted. Earl's hand shot down over the red satin panties, but it was a false alarm. Granny was sound asleep in her wheelchair, parked by the space heater that looked like a fireplace but wasn't. Her brown blanket with the airbrushed Howlin' Wolf on it was tucked around her skinny legs, just like it was every night in winter. Sleeping through anything was Granny's superpower, and Earl was thankful for it tonight. He didn't want her to see him in this outfit. He didn't want to explain. He didn't want to speak of this ever again. Earl double-checked the deadbolt, then started for his room, but he stopped at the big fish tank by the side window first. He couldn't help it. He had to check on his new friends. His real friends. The goldfish he rescued from owls had perked up considerably. They even came out to greet him. "At least you guys appreciate me. Feels nice after the night I've had." Earl sprinkled some food in, and the goldfish did happy little loop-de-loops as they ate. "You all look so much better. Clean water and food, a little love, and a safe place to live. That's all anyone needs. We aren't so different, you and me." Suddenly, Earl was bathed in pink light so bright and warm it looked like an angel had materialized outside the window, because one did. Holly had turned on her lights. Earl could see her through the window, walking from her kitchen to her living room. She had on a pink satin robe with fuzzy trim around the collar, and her hair was wrapped in fat pink curlers. She looked like a Hollywood starlet clutching a Tupperware bowl full of Day-Glo orange cheese puffs. Earl's heart fluttered just looking at her, until he remembered he was standing in front of the window in red satin panties. If Holly looked over, she'd see everything, and he'd never be able to look her in the eyes ever again. Earl started for his room, but someone knocked on the door. He froze. Bucky had come for him. Bucky was here, and Earl couldn't face him wearing this. He whirled around looking for something, anything to cover himself up. Luckily, Granny had done the laundry. The basket sat on the end of the old brown floral sofa, waiting to be folded. Earl grabbed a sweater and a pair of pants off the top and pulled them on. Then he ducked down and slunk as quiet as possible to the door. He stayed low so no one could see him through the tiny diamond-shaped windows at the top. He grabbed a chair and quietly slid it under the knob. It wouldn't be enough to stop Chester and his giant cousins, but it might slow them down. Earl crouched down out of sight while he figured out what to do next. Maybe if he were really quiet, they'd go away. Maybe they'd look for him somewhere else. They knocked again, and Granny shrieked, "Ah, fish!" Her eyes were closed, her head was back, mouth open, drooling. She must be dreaming. But the murderous goons on the other side of the door heard her, because they pounded again, harder this time. So much for staying quiet. Just Earl's luck. Granny opened one eye and said, "What the heck are you waiting for? Answer the door!" "Granny, shush!" She didn't. "What are you doing over there, Earl? Open the door before they knock again. All that racket hurts my ears." All hope drained out of Earl. The walls and doors and old trailers were so thin, Earl knew Bucky heard every word clear as day. Bucky knew he was here. Now he'd never leave. Earl had no choice but to make a stand. He decided to go down fighting, so he grabbed his old baseball bat out of the umbrella stand. Earl only played Little League for half a season, but Granny had kept that bat by the door ever since. Earl rose up, slow and quiet, just high enough to peek out the window to see who he was dealing with. He saw blinking red and green Christmas lights, and his stomach dropped. It wasn't Bucky. It was so much worse. It was Chip, Carl, and Craig, the 3 C's. They stood on his porch dressed like old-fashioned aristocrats, top hats and tuxedo coats with Jolly Carolers Club sashes across their chest. They had blinking green and red Christmas lights sewn to their collars and held battery-powered candles with faux flickering flames that were blindingly bright. Earl moved the chair, opened the door a crack, and said, "Go away, now's not a good time." He slammed the door shut, but it hit something and bounced back. Chip's boot was in the crack. "Don't be a grump, Frost," Chip said. "We came all the way out here to sing you a song. Do you know how many people were on the wait list for carolers this year? We had to skip some fine, upstanding citizens to make room for you." Chip looked Earl up and down, frowning. "Gee, how charitable," Earl said. "Sure is. I promised Holly I'd bring cheer to the cheer list tonight, and I am a man of my word. A good thing, too. Look at this place. No Christmas lights? I knew you were a Scrooge, but this is a tragedy." Granny yelled, "There's a light string out there. Just step on the switch and hurry up. You're letting all the heat out. I ain't made of money." Fire rose in Earl's cheeks, but the 3 C's were the least of his problems. He poked his head out to look behind him, expecting Bucky's van to come roaring into the trailer park any second. Chip stepped on Granny's power strip and a single string of flashing blue lights clicked on. "Well, it's not much, but it'll do. At least Holly's in the spirit. I'm heading over there next." Chip winked at Earl, then he said, "Nice sweater, but the pants really make the outfit." Earl looked down. He should have paid more attention to the laundry. He had on the red polyester "I do it for the hose" Santa sweater his Aunt Clara had gotten him for Christmas last year, along with Granny's stretch pants. the ones with the dancing snowmen on them. And ooh boy, were they stretched. So tight the snowmen looked like they were melting in terror, and here Earl thought this night couldn't get any worse. "Well, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and sing, then go," Earl said. "Well, no need to get snippy," Chip scowled. "We have prepared one song, picked extra special just for you. Of course, you're welcome to listen in when we sing for Holly. I got something epic planned for her, and it's going to end with me asking her for a date. She's going to be so wild she can't say no." Chip shark grinned, and Earl gripped that baseball bat so tight it should have snapped in half. The three C's cleared their throats and began to sing, "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch," because of course that's the song they picked. Earl gritted his teeth and quietly endured until they sang the part about a seasick crocodile and Granny's Christmas lights popped off the eaves and landed on the porch. They hit so hard that sparks and plastic chunks flew everywhere. Chip, Carl, and Craig looked at each other confused, but they didn't stop singing. Earl was confused too. Those lights didn't fall off. They were pulled off. "What are you idiots doing to my lights?" Granny said. "Those cost money." Carl and Craig looked nervous, but Chip side-eyed them and they kept singing. Earl leaned out to look around, but saw nothing but deep, pitch-black winter darkness all around, except for Holly's place, of course, and the lone tall streetlight over the Misty Pines sign. All the other trailers were dark. The folks in Misty Pines were either old and asleep by now or already downtown at the festival. Then something white flashed behind Chip, Carl, and Craig. The singing abruptly stopped, and hot liquid hit Earl's face. "What the?" Earl wiped his eyes, and when he opened them to see what hit him, he had to wipe them again because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Chip, Carl, and Craig's heads were gone. Their bodies stood upright, still holding their battery-powered candles, but their necks were ragged wounds shooting blood straight up like freshly popped champagne bottles. Then their bodies fell and hit the porch with a loud thunk, thunk, thunk like hunks of dead meat. Because they were. Earl wanted to scream but couldn't. Something stood on the porch staring at him. Emphasis on thing. A creature as tall as a man, broad and thick, with a white scaly body. Its head looked like an anglerfish, with a huge mouth lined with spiky teeth. It had giant glassy blind eyes surrounded by a head full of octopus tentacles. Gills fluttered at its neck, its mouth open and closed, swallowing in air. It wasn't Bucky's crab creature from the Black Lagoon this time. It was a fish that walked on land like a man, a fish man, and it was big. Holy shit, Earl thought. Bucky's monsters are real. The fishman hissed. Then it stomped a giant webbed foot down on the three C's battery-powered candles and blinking sashes. It stomped and stomped until the lights fizzled and went dark. Earl wanted to scream, but wasn't dumb enough to do it out loud. So he screamed on the inside, "Holy shit, that's a goddamn fish monster! And they're real! And I don't want to die wearing satin panties! And ah!" Mostly the last two things over and over, until the fishman's gigantic webbed hand came down next to Earl. It ripped the porch light clean off the siding, leaving nothing but sparking wires. The porch went dark, and the fishman stepped over the three C's bodies coming for Earl. It was trying to get in the house. It made a horrible clicking sound as it moved. Earl lifted his baseball bat but hesitated because it was Little League size, not Major League. Hitting this thing with such a tiny bat felt like trying to kill a big spider with a flip-flop. If Earl hit it and didn't kill it, he'd just piss it off. Then the whole situation would be worse. "Earl, move!" Granny screamed. Earl didn't. He puffed up instead, making himself look bigger and tougher while he tried to figure out what to do. That's what you were supposed to do when facing a bigger predator. He saw it on TV. But it didn't work. The thing kept coming, so that was the last time Earl was going to trust anything he saw on the Nature Channel. Granny yelled, "Earl, move now!" "No, it'll get in!" Earl held steady, blocking the door as the thing hissed and clicked at him, until Granny's wheelchair rolled into the back of his leg and he heard the cock of a gun. He looked back. Granny was right behind him with a double-barrel shotgun in her bent old hands. "I said drop!" She lifted the butt of that gun, and boy did Earl drop. He wasn't stupid. Granny had a gun, but she also had palsy. It'd be a miracle if she could hold on to something that heavy, let alone hold it steady enough to hit what she was aiming for. The creature hissed and stepped through the door. Its fat, webbed foot hit the gold shag carpet, and Granny fired. Chapter 5. Granny's Got a Gun. The boom shook the trailer. The fishman screeched, so high-pitched the window glass rattled in the frames. The fishman held onto the door frame, righted itself, then stepped back in. Granny hadn't killed it. She'd just pissed it off. She cocked her gun and fired again. The fish stumbled backward out the door. It landed on the pile of headless bullies on the porch, twitched for a few seconds, then stopped moving. Granny had blown a hole in the creature's chest so big Earl could see through it. Green blood poured out of the wound. The fishman lay on top of Chip, Carl, and Craig's headless bodies like a scaly white cherry on a three-jerk sundae. It was dead, like D-E-A-D, dead. Earl screamed, "What the fuck?" "You watch your language or I'll wash your mouth out with soap. Now get up and lock the door," Granny said, eerily calm. "There'll be more. Those things travel in schools." "Schools?" Earl sat up straight. "Is that why you've been buying all those bullets? We've got 3 dead carolers and a fish monster on the porch. Why are you still sitting there?" Granny said. "Lock the door." Granny didn't have to tell Earl a third time. He was up in a flash, pushing the thing's giant webbed foot across the jamb. It was heavy, with scales thick as armor and long, thick claws that looked tough enough to dig through concrete. Earl managed to push the foot all the way out. Then he slammed the door shut, clicked the bolt, and put the chair under the knob again. Not that a measly chair and a plywood door would stop one of those things if it really wanted in. Earl's brain buzzed. Bucky's big white fish scale wasn't a lie. The fishmen were real, and they were here, and even though he'd seen one, he still couldn't believe it. Granny wasn't ruffled. She was cool as a wrinkled old cucumber. She had the same expression on her face she had when she was knitting or watching her soaps. Mildly interested, mildly annoyed. She had an open box of shells on her lap and was reloading her shotgun. "Why are you still standing there? Pull the curtains, turn out the lights, and be real quiet," she said. "We gotta make 'em think no one's home. So go on then, get moving." Earl kicked into action, stumbling around the house, turning off lamps and pulling curtains shut. Granny talked while Earl worked. "Crazy things up here in the woods and in the water. The cities might be tame, but out here, humans aren't top of the chain," she said. "I swore the day those things took your daddy that I wouldn't let them get you." "What?" Earl froze. Granny told him his daddy had gone ice fishing, trying to catch them something nice for Christmas dinner, and he drowned. "You told me it was an accident." "I saw his body. I know those things killed your daddy, and now they're back again," Granny said. "Now you know the truth. Try to keep up." Earl thought his brain was racing before. Now it was doing laps. "I begged him not to go fishing, but he was stubborn." Granny fiddled with their gun. "I told him those things were out there, but he didn't believe me. I prayed he'd be all right, that they wouldn't come back, but they did. See, that year they took your daddy, that wasn't the first time they came." "How do you know that?" Earl couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was a lot to process. "When I was 10 years old, my pappy took me fishing on the lake. Nobody had money then. The whole town was poor, hand to mouth. The mines were tapped and the forests were cut bare. The whole town was desperate. The coal companies were blasting deep, too deep, in the mines trying to find new veins. I think they blasted those things out instead." Granny stared at the wood-paneled wall as she spoke, like she was staring off into the past. "We were hungry, so just like your daddy, my pappy wanted to catch something special for us for Christmas dinner. I begged him to take me, so he bundled me up in my warmest clothes, and we went fishing, hoping to load up on trout by dinner time. But there were no fish, not a single bite all day. It's like something scared them all away. Pappy wasn't going home with nothing, so we stayed out casting lines and hoping until the sun went down. They came at dark. Pappy was singing a song. We were laughing. Then he lit his lantern, and they punched holes up through the ice. Pappy held the lantern out so he could see what was going on, and that's when they grabbed him, pulled him down under. He never came back up," she said. "I'll never forget the white scales, the giant claws. We didn't see him again until spring, when his body washed up by the point slashed to ribbons." Granny dabbed a tear from her eye with the corner of her Christmas reindeer sweater. "I thought they were going to get me too, but I stayed as quiet and still as I could in the dark until they all went away." "What?" Earl's brain felt like loose wires. "That'll happen when you suddenly find out that fish monsters were real. They lived in the lake across the road from your trailer park. They had killed your daddy and your great-grandpap, and they were back again, fixing to kill you." It was a lot for one man to take in, although Bucky's motives made more sense now. Those things were strong, tough, able to take 3 men's heads off with one swat. There's no way humans could beat those things, not if they traveled in schools. And if you can't beat him, you may as well join him. Although Earl wasn't sure Bucky knew what he was doing. That dead fish monster out there didn't look like the kind of fellow who'd want to strike a deal with a 60-year-old chain smoker who sold used porn out of a single wide. But maybe Bucky knew something Earl didn't. I've already lost 2 men I love to those monsters. I ain't losing another, so pull yourself together and follow me. And be real quiet. Probably more of those things out there. We don't want to draw any attention to ourselves. Granny wheeled down the hall, shotgun across her lap. Earl did not want to end up decapitated or ripped to shreds at the bottom of Holiday Lake, so he pulled the last curtain closed and followed Granny to the master bedroom. Her room was the same as Bucky's, except it was nice. Granny vacuumed. There wasn't any porn, and it didn't reek of Chesterfield cigarettes. Granny wheeled up to the antique hope chest she kept in the corner. I don't know much, but I know they live out there somewhere deep where they never see the light. Sometimes they come out, and when they do, they're real mad. Granny pulled out a long metal key and stuck it in the lock. They kill, but they never eat, so it isn't hunger. It must be something else that's bringing them out, making them attack. Well, what? Earl asked. What is it? Hell if I know, Granny shrugged. You knew they were out there this whole time and you don't know? Why don't you know? Why don't you have a plan? Earl had never sassed Granny like that, but panic didn't lead to good decisions. Well, I was hoping you'd figure it out. Granny jiggled the lock and the chest slid open. Me? I don't know anything. I live with my granny and I work at the mini-mart. A man's paycheck is not the measure of his talent or worth. Granny wagged a bony finger at him. You've got smarts. You know more than you think you do, she said. Why do you think I got you all those fish when you were little? We were preparing for this very day. You know fish better than anyone. You must have learned something after all these years, something that will help us get those things out of here for good. Earl thought back. Granny bought him his first fish shortly after his daddy died. She'd driven him 2 counties over to the big nice pet store. Earl picked out a goldfish, a big one with a wrinkled head. His name was Bruce. Earl crossed himself. He still missed that fish. He'd helped Earl through a lot of long, sad nights. I thought you loved fish. Ugh, can't stand 'em. I get the willies every time I walk by the tank, Granny said. Earl's jaw dropped. How could you say that? You'd say that if you'd almost been killed by a giant fish man, she said. Fair, Earl said. But what am I supposed to do? Keeping goldfish is one thing. Defeating a school of scaly armored monsters from the deep is another. All I got is a baseball bat. This thing won't make a dent in those scales. Earl lifted his bat, and boy, did it look extra small. For the first time in his life, he wished he'd stuck with the baseball long enough to get a bigger bat. No, but this will. Granny turned back to her chest and lifted a shallow tray off the top, revealing what lay underneath. Earl couldn't believe his eyes. Her hope chest looked like Granny had been hoping for war. It was nothing but row after row of neatly stacked boxes of ammo, all the ones she'd been buying, year after year. Holy shit, Earl said. You watch your language. I will wash your mouth out with soap. We may live in a trailer, but being trash is the choice. Sorry, Granny, Earl said. Here, I bought this for you a long time ago. Granny moved some of the ammo around, then lifted out a bubblegum pink shotgun. Really? Pink? Man, it just wasn't Earl's day. Still shoots. Granny handed it to him. Bought it for you when your mama was pregnant. Not my fault she didn't bother to get an ultrasound. We all thought you were a girl till you popped out and we saw your dinger. Earl tugged his collar. Right now his dinger was in a pair of teeny red satin panties. He made a mental note to change clothes first chance he got. Listen, I don't know how many of those things are out there or why they keep coming back, but one thing I do know, Granny said, after they took Pappy and they came up out of the ice again, they looked right at me with those big eyes. I didn't make a sound, and I stayed as still and quiet as I could, and then they left. It's like they didn't see me. I think they're blind. I also think they hate light. Maybe it hurts them, I don't know, but they ripped Pappy's lantern to shreds, and tonight they ripped our porch light clean off. Got me thinking. They attack bright things. Maybe they're drawn to them, like moths. Bright things? Oh, no. Next thing Earl knew, he was running as fast as he could in tiny snowman stretch pants to the window by the fish tank. He peeked through the slit in the curtain. Oh, no. Granny was right. The fishmen did travel in schools, and a handful of them dotted the gravel road that cut through the middle of Misty Pines. They were also drawn to bright things. Every one of those fish was shuffling toward Holly's place, drawn to the lights dotting her yard, hanging from the eaves, pouring from her windows. Earl could see Holly lounging on her sofa, eating cheese puffs, totally unaware of the monsters outside. She was in danger, and she had no idea. Earl couldn't have that. He held the bubblegum pink shotgun to his chest and said, Hold on, girl. I'm coming to get you. Chapter 6. Holly and the Fishmen. Earl didn't think, he moved. He didn't know much, but he knew 2 things for certain. 1, Holly Green was the girl of his dreams, even if she didn't know it. And 2, even if she never felt the same way about him, Earl wasn't going to let a school of murderous fishmen touch a single hair on her beautiful bleach blonde head. So Earl did what any man in love would do. He gripped his bubblegum pink shotgun to his chest and ran outside. And now that he was stepping over 3 dead bullies and a fishman with a hole shot clean through it, trying real hard not to slip on the blood pooling on the steps, Earl was thinking maybe he should have spent a minute drumming up a real plan before running out the door. But Holly's life was on the line, so Earl would just have to wing it. He tiptoed across the gravel driveway between his trailer and hers and took cover behind Granny's wheelchair minivan. Everywhere he looked, white shapes skulked in the moonlight, shuffling across Main Street toward the trailer park, stepping out of the gap between old Edna Weebler's 1956 double-decker pacemaker and the Noby's 1976 Hillcrest single-wide, dotting the gravel road, cutting through the center of Misty Pines. One had already made it to Holly's white picket fence and was swatting at the inflatable Santa that sang, "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas," over a tinny synthesizer track. Another was ripping up the fiber optic flowers and pink plastic flamingos by her mailbox. Earl checked his bullet situation. With these things roaming around, every shot was going to count. But the chamber was empty. The gun wasn't loaded. And worse, he'd run out of the house without ammo. His head spun for a split second from the panic. He couldn't fight these things off with nothing. He had to go back. He turned, and a fishman stepped out from behind Granny's wheelchair minivan, blocking the way home. It was so close Earl could smell its breath. Rotten fish mixed with muddy creek bed. Earl stayed as quiet and still as possible, praying he didn't die. He didn't need Granny finding out about his red satin panties at the morgue. By some miracle, the fishman didn't notice Earl. It tilted its head back and clicked. Then it waited like it was listening. It did this over and over. Click, then wait, until Holly's inflatable Santa started singing again. The fishman hissed, then shuffled over to help his friend rip the singing Santa to shreds. They made quick work of it. And when Santa fell silent, they tried to break through Holly's fence to get at her porch lights. Earl could see Holly through the side window, curled up on her pink velour sofa, pushing a handful of cheese puffs into her mouth. She had a ring of bright orange artificial cheese dust on her luscious lips. Earl had always dreamed of kissing it off her while she watched Love Island, but if those fish monsters got to her before he did, he'd never get the chance. Earl couldn't let that happen. He had to save that woman right now, and the only way to do that was to stay quiet and stay in the dark. Not easy. Every bit of Holly's trailer was lit up. Christmas lights ran along the eaves. Spotlights poked out of the bushes angled up at the trailer. Holly called it mood lighting, but really her porch and yard were lit up like a carnival midway. Earl couldn't just waltz up to the front door and knock. It'd be like stepping into a spotlight. Those fish would slash him to bits before Holly could answer the door. It seemed hopeless until Earl saw Holly's side door. It was behind a little shed that bumped out just enough to cast it into shadow. Earl went for it. He hopped her perfectly manicured evergreen hedge and ran. He dropped to his knees next to the door and grabbed the little pink painted rocks dotting the flower bed one by one. One had a spare key under it. He'd used it when he'd taken care of Jellybean, Holly's fancy long-haired white cat with a squinched-up face and bad attitude, last summer when she went to Myrtle Beach for a girls' trip. The air filled with clicks. Desperate, irritated clicks. The fishmen weren't happy. "Come on, where are you?" The rocks all looked the same in the dark. Earl moved down the line, flipping them as fast as he could, and he found the key under the very last rock. Figures. A second later, he was falling into her hallway and shutting and locking the door behind him. "Holly!" His voice was a squeak. His throat was tight and dry. "Holly!" "Meow!" Jellybean got to Earl first. He greeted him by planting 2 paws on Earl's thigh and digging his claws in deep as he stretched. "Earl Frost, is that you?" Holly stepped into the hallway, a vision in pink satin. "This isn't exactly how I pictured you getting in my back door. What you doing back there?" She looked him up and down and smiled. "Well, look at you. Are you going to the festival? That outfit will definitely shut Chip up. That took some guts. I love it. You know, you should wear tight pants more often. They show off that cute behind of yours." She walked up to Earl and pinched his cheeks. His downstairs cheeks. "Know what? I think I might like to go to the festival too, just to see the look on Chip's face. If you don't mind waiting a minute, I'll make myself look like something and go with you. It'll be fun." She started to walk away, but Earl grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "What are you doing?" She looked up at him, then down at his hand, then up at him. Who is this new confident Earl? Grabbing what he lacks. I like it. She licked some of that orange cheese dust off her glorious lips. Earl wanted to kiss her like one of those bare-chested heroes on the covers of those romance novels she was always reading, but now wasn't the time. There was a school of killer fishmen on her lawn, and they'd decapitated 3 beefy dudes with one swipe already. "I'm here to save you." Earl wrapped one arm around her waist and pulled her close. "Turn off all the lights inside and out." "Ooh, Earl Frost. I never thought I'd see the day. About time you got the hint," she purred. "Now, this is going to sound crazy, but I always wanted to play pizza deliverer man. You think you could handle that, sugar?" Nothing she said made any sense, and Earl didn't have time to figure it out. Monsters were rising from the sea. This was life and death, so he said, "Fish man!" "Well, never heard of that game, but I'm open-minded. How about we see where the night takes us? Hold on." Her brows furrowed as if she was confused. "Why do you have a gun? Wait, is that for me? What an amazing gift. You Frosts are so thoughtful. Pink is my favorite color. You know, when Granny dropped off bullets last week, I thought she was crazy, but now it makes sense. You are sweet as sugar, Earl Frost." "Shh," Earl said. There was a crash outside. Jellybean ran to the front door. Holly pulled away. Earl tried to pull her back, but she slid out of his grip, damn satin, and stomped down the hall, through the kitchen-living room combo to the front door. Earl followed. "What on earth is going on out there, Jellybean?" Holly said. "Are those Noby brats trying to steal my flamingos again?" Jellybean scratched at the front door, growling, puffed up so big he looked like a big white ball. Holly grabbed the pink curtain covering the window and pulled it back. A fishman stood on the other side of the glass, and the second it saw the light pouring from inside, it hissed. "Ah!" Holly screamed. Earl put his hand over her mouth, but she screamed right through it. "What the fuck is that?" Her hands balled into fists, and she started punching air. The thing's claw came down on her porch light. It flickered, and sparks flew. Something inside Holly snapped. "Oh, hell no. I worked hard to make this place nice. Some big ugly tuna isn't going to come along and ruin it." She grabbed the gun right out of Earl's hands, aimed, and fired. Click. Nothing, because no ammo, remember? The creature punched the window, and its claws went right through the glass. Holly didn't miss a beat. She stomped over to a fancy table with a flower arrangement on it, opened a mirrored box, and pulled some shells out. She loaded that gun like she was a pro, turned around and stomped back to the window. She slid the shotgun out the broken pane right into the creature's open, hissing mouth and yelled, "I said get off my lawn!" Boom. Holly shot that gun, and that fish's big white head exploded like the Death Star, splattering Holly with bright green fish brains and guts. The creature dropped dead, landing hard on her porch steps. She stood there for a moment, her face covered in green slime and fish brain chunks. Then she said in a flat, calm voice, "What the hell's going on?" Monster fish have come out of the lake. They attack everything that's bright. Chip, Carl, and Craig are dead, and one of those things took their heads off with one swipe, so I came over here to save you. There are more of them outside." May as well tell it to her straight, right? "Well then," she smoothed out her robe and her pink curlers, "we're going to send them all back to hell where they came from, right?" Earl nodded. Holly was Earl's kind of woman, clear-headed in a crisis, tougher than steel. Holly's phone rang, and she huffed. "Really?" She swished to the sofa and fished it out of the cushions, gun still slung over her shoulder. "Hello?" "Oh, hey, Granny Frost." Yeah, he told me." "Uh-huh. Yep. Don't worry, I took care of it. 'Kay, bye." She tossed the phone onto the sofa. That was Granny. She said you forgot your phone and your bullets. She said to use mine. I told her we did. Another crash came from outside. "What are they doing now?" Holly went to the window. The fishmen were clawing at the pink lights she had lovingly placed around her house and stomping her pink flower pots filled with fiber optic flowers down to bits. She leaned out the broken window and yelled, "Get out of here! Go on, get!" The creatures turned toward the trailer, toward the sound of her voice. Earl pulled her away from the window and closed the curtain. Then he made sure the front door was bolted. "They're going to rip this place apart unless we turn off all the lights and stay quiet. They hate the lights. It draws them in." "Well, why didn't you say that before?" "I did." "Don't get stippy with me, Earl Frost. My night isn't going how I planned," Holly said. "Well, mine isn't either." He meant it. "First Bucky, now this. We need to turn off the lights." They kicked into gear. They moved through the trailer, turning off lamps, hitting switches, pulling curtains closed, and when they finished, they stayed quiet, except for Jellybean, who howled and scratched at the front door. Inside, in the dark, Holly grabbed onto Earl and squeezed him tight. They could hear the slip, slip sound of slimy, heavy bodies stomping around outside and the sound of claws scratching at the siding. "Why are they still trying to get in?" Earl said. "We turned off all the lights." Holly's voice trembled. "Maybe not all the lights. I can't turn off the outside lights. The power strip is on the porch." Holly pointed to the front door. "What?" Earl felt like he was being sucked down into a whirlpool of dread. "The outside lights were the most important ones." "Well, don't get sassy with me, Earl Frost," Holly squeaked. "I'm not going outside. I was planning to get a remote so I could shut them off from in here, but I was waiting till Al's after Christmas clearance sale. I only do nails over at the hairdo hut 3 days a week. I am on a budget." The panic in her voice did something to Earl. It made him stand up stick straight, puff his chest, and a weird feeling rose up in him. It felt something like bravery. "Don't you worry. I'll take care of it. I'm going to go out there and I'll turn off the lights." He didn't want to go out there with those things. He wasn't stupid. He saw how easily they could kill a man or 3, but he knew he had to go or they were both goners, and he couldn't have that. Earl moved to the door. Holly pulled him back. "You can't go out there." Oh, yes, he could, and he was gonna. Earl tapped the pink shotgun in Holly's hand and said, "Cover me." Chapter 7. Jellybean versus the Fishmen. "Let me load up first." Holly went back to the mirror box of ammo and reloaded the gun. Earl went to the window and peeked through the curtain, trying to see what he was up against. One fishman stomping the fiber optic flowers by Holly's white picket fence, 2 scrambling through that neatly trimmed evergreen hedge, another at the corner crunching a string of Christmas lights down to bits, and 2 standing next to the remains of that singing Santa, ripping up the little white picket fence, and another 2 who weren't too smart, batting at the light beams coming from the tall, skinny metal light pole over the Misty Pines sign. "The power strip is right outside the door to your left." Holly moved up behind Earl, gun ready. "Just step on it and run back inside as fast as you can, you hear?" Sounds easy enough. Earl hoped that was true. There were an awful lot of monsters out there. "I'll be right behind you with this." Holly held that bubblegum pink shotgun like it was made for her, and Earl Frost had never loved her more. Earl grabbed Holly by the loose flub of her upper arms, pulled her close, and said, "If something happens to me, lock the door and hide, you hear me?" "Shut your mouth, Earl Frost. I won't let anything happen to you." Her lips trembled. Her eyes were wet with tears. He looked into those wet eyes and decided to say the big words, all 3 of them. This might be his last chance. "Holly, Yes, Earl Frost." She looked up at him, lips still dusted with faux orange cheese powder and green fish brains and guts, but it didn't matter. He still wanted to kiss her. So he leaned in, but before their monster slime-coated lips touched, a fishman punched through her big side window. Glass shattered. Holly screamed. She whirled around, gun up, ready to shoot, but the fishman didn't come in. He planted a giant web foot on the windowsill and hoisted himself up so he could grab at the Christmas lights hanging from the eaves. "If I don't make it, remember, hide and stay quiet. Promise me," Earl whispered. "No way, I won't leave you out there. Promise me." "Fine, but it won't get to that. Not as long as I've got Sparky here." Holly raised the shotgun. "Okay." Sparky was the gun. She'd named it. It was hers now. "If you shoot that thing like you did earlier, we might stand a chance." Earl moved to the door. Jellybean was in front of it, puffed up and hissing. Earl slid him away with his foot. "You better hide under the sofa." Jellybean did figure 8s around Earl's snow boots instead, begging for pets. "Jellybean loves you a lot, so you come back, you hear?" Holly said. "I'll try my darndest." Earl scratched Jellybean behind the ears, then steeled himself and unlocked the door. Holly whispered, "Be careful." "I will, trust me." He took one more look at the critters outside, decided there was enough distance between him and them to get the job done. Then he opened the door and stepped out. He replayed Holly's instructions, hit the power strip, run back in. Didn't sound too hard, except he looked all around and didn't see a power strip. "Where is it?" Heat rose in his cheeks. Panic. "I don't see it." Holly and Sparky leaned out the door. "Hurry, Earl, what are you waiting for?" "I can't find the strip. It's by the rail," she pointed. He still didn't see it. "Where?" "There, I painted it pink to match the boards." "Damn it." He'd never hated matching pink paint as much as he did in that moment. Earl went where Holly pointed and started stomping on anything that didn't look flat. The fishman definitely noticed. Earl sounded like the world's chubbiest Irish river dancer, tap-tapping on those boards with his big rubber-sized 13 snow boots. They turned toward him, hissing and clicking and cutting their giant claws through the air, and suddenly the easy plan didn't seem so easy anymore. "Earl, They're coming. Hurry. I'm hurrying. He stopped and his boot hit something hard. All the Christmas lights hanging on the eaves and gutters went dark. Yes! His elation was short-lived. No! The yard was still lit. All the spotlights were still on, and most of them were pointing right at the porch, right at Earl. He had so much light in his eyes, he felt like he was back on stage at Holiday Lake Elementary, playing Snowman number 3 in Mrs. Clement's second-grade Christmas pageant. The fishman zeroed in on him and lurched forward. Earl didn't have much time. Those things weren't Olympic sprinters, but there were a lot of them, and they looked mad. Why is the yard still lit? Earl said. The spotlights are solar. I didn't even think about it. The batteries just fizzle out on their own every night, Holly said. You gotta be shitting me, Earl said. Cue the soap, Granny. Earl was about to spew a cloud of expletives so big it'd cover the upper Midwest. Earl backed toward the door. What are we gonna do? Holly's voice trembled. You go out the back, stay in the shadows, get over to my place. You'll be safe there. Granny's got plenty of ammo. I'll distract him while you go. Oh, no, you will not, Holly said. I'm not leaving you. You go. I'll take care of the lights. Save yourself. Earl meant it, so much so that he stepped over the dead creature on her porch and jumped down into the yard. What are you doing? Holly squeaked. You get back here, Earl Frost. He was going for the spotlights. He was going to rip every last one of them out of the ground and turn them off somehow or die trying, because the fishmen wouldn't leave Misty Pines as long as they stayed on, and if it bought Holly time to run, all the better. Unfortunately, the fishman chewing on the Christmas light string dangling from the corner realized it had gone dark and lumbered up to Earl. Earl stumbled backward, nearly falling on top of the dead fish on the stairs. The fishman raised its big, fat, scaly arm, spread its razor-sharp claws, and Earl knew he was a goner. Holly screamed, Jellybean, no! Something white whizzed past Earl's head. It was Jellybean, puffed up like a puffer fish. That cat went airborne and landed smack on the creature's face with so much force the fishman had to wave its massive arms to keep from falling. Jellybean dug in tight and held on. The fish squealed in agony. Don't just stand there, help him, Holly screamed. Well, you heard the woman. Against his better judgment, which screamed run, Earl walked up to the fishman and grabbed Jellybean by the middle. There was a lot to grab. Jellybean was at least 20 pounds and long. He was also stubborn and mean. That's why Earl was the cat sitter. Most people wouldn't go near him. Earl pulled, but Jellybean didn't let go. His back feet jackhammered the fishman's big blind eyes, pounding them into watery, shredded bits. The creature squealed in agony and swatted at its face, trying to get that cat off, but it couldn't. Its arms were too stumpy and short to wipe the angry cat off its own face, which was good for Jellybean, but not so much for Earl, because the fishman's razor-sharp claws cut through the air all around him. Earl ducked and dodged, pulling on the cat, wondering if Jellybean was going to be the death of him. Get back in here quick, they're coming, Holly said. Earl looked. A line of fishmen was coming right for him, hissing, claws up, coming to the aid of their squealing friend, and here he was, hanging on to a fat, mean old cat. You let go right now, Jellybean, or I'm leaving ya. Earl meant it, but he hoped it didn't come to that because Holly would never forgive him. Jellybean didn't listen, so Earl let go. He had to while he still had a head. He turned to run and noticed the fishmen had stopped. They stood stone still like statues. They looked up at the sky and started clicking. The ground began to shake. Another tremor, just like the one at Owl's. It wasn't enough to throw Earl off balance. He barely felt it at all. But the fishmen wobbled like they were standing on a tilt-a-whirl. They screeched like they were in pain, and their tentacles whipped around their big, ugly heads. Earl gave Jellybean one more yank, and the cat finally popped off that fishman's face. He was stiff in Earl's hands, eyes wide, claws out, like the danger of the situation had sunk into his tiny feline brain. He tucked Jellybean under his arm like a big fat furry football. For about a second, Jellybean had other ideas. He clawed up Earl's chest, wrapped himself around Earl's neck, then sunk his claws into Earl's scalp so he didn't fall off. Ow! Earl turned to the door. His plan to grab all the spotlights was doomed until he noticed that the creatures were still really freaked out by the ground shaking under their feet. Like really freaked out. Like screeching and stumbling around and falling in all directions like they were disoriented, even though, as far as Earl could tell, the tremors had stopped. Earl went for it. He ran around the yard, ripping up Holly's solar lights by the stakes, despite the horrific pain of Jellybean hanging onto his neck for dear life. He ran, dodging disoriented fish guys like it was his job, and he didn't stop until Holly's trailer finally fell into darkness. He'd done it. He'd saved Misty Pines and the girl of his dreams. He turned to the porch, ready to run inside, but didn't. He couldn't. The fish guys had fully recovered. A row of them stood between him and Holly's front door, and they were coming for him. Earl had an armload of solar spotlights lighting him up like a disco ball. He swallowed hard. Well, shit. Chapter 8. Well, shit, indeed. The fishmen closed in around Earl, and he didn't know what to do. The situation was dire. He had an armful of spotlights, a cat hanging onto his neck for dear life, and no plan. Get back in here, I'll cover you. Holly didn't run to Granny's. She stood on the porch, gun moving from fishman to fishman, like they were targets in the county fair shooting game. Watch where you're pointing that thing. Earl didn't know if he should be more scared of the fishmen or of Holly accidentally shooting him. Either way, he'd never make it to the door. There were too many fish between here and there. Earl Frost! Holly screamed. A fishman brought its claw down. Earl moved too late. A claw grazed his cheek, and it erupted in searing pain. He stumbled, and Jellybean clawed his way up the back of Earl's skull. The cat hissed, then catapulted off Earl's head and landed on the fish's face before he could cut Earl again. Jellybean did a Fred Flintstone run on the creature's eyeball. It squealed and fell into another fishman, and the two of them went down like dominoes. Jellybean shot up and went airborne. He landed on another creature and sank his teeth into its eye. It dropped into the snow and rolled around squealing. The poor thing tried to get Jellybean off its face, but couldn't grab him with its short arms. Their anatomy wasn't designed to fend off land-dwelling felines. Jellybean wasn't finished. He jumped from one fishman to another, using their eyeballs as scratching posts. He moved from one to the next so fast he was a fat white blur. Holly screamed, "Jellybean, no!" Earl cheered, "Jellybean, yes!" That cat was dynamite, a puffed-up murder ball of claws and teeth. The fishmen were so busy with Jellybean, they didn't pay any attention at all to Earl and his armful of lights. This was his chance to save Misty Pines and everyone in it, and he was going to take it. Earl turned and ran smack into another fishman. It had a couple of Holly's pink plastic flamingos in its mouth. It saw the lights Earl was carrying and raised its webbed hand, ready to attack. "Oh, hell no!" Holly's rage-filled voice rose behind Earl. The fishman stopped, listening. "Those are antique, original Featherstone flamingos. Do you know how hard it was to find those? You goddamn fish are done ripping up my house!" Boom. She fired. The fishman's head exploded, coating Earl in blood and brains head to toe. It dropped, a headless hunk of dead meat on the snow. The flamingos hit the ground unharmed, apart from a couple of chew marks on their pink plastic behinds. Earl stood there for a second in complete shock. "Damn, girl, how'd you get to be such a good shot?" "I was the 4-H junior champion in shooting sports at the county fair 3 years running." She cocked the gun, ready to go again. And it was official. Earl loved Holly, and he would never love another as long as he lived. Easy promise to keep, considering he could be 5 minutes from the end of his life. But still. A door creaked open on the other side of the gravel road, and Edna Weebler poked her head out of her 1956 double-decker pacemaker trailer and said, "I hear you setting off your New Year's fireworks early. You better cut it out. We have a noise ordinance, you know." The old lady didn't seem to notice the big white fish everywhere. Then again, she was in her nightgown and wasn't wearing glasses. "You mind your own damn business, Edna Weebler. Now you shut that door and go back inside right now before I show you what's what." Holly flashed her gun. "Don't make me come over there and shut that door for you." "Well, I never. I'm filing a complaint. This isn't over." Edna Weebler huffed, but she went inside and locked her door. "Oh, Edna Weebler and her nib-nose almost got us all killed," Holly huffed. But Holly was wrong. Edna Weebler had saved them. She'd given Earl an idea. Earl ran to the space between Edna Weebler's 1956 double-decker pacemaker and the Noby's 1976 Hillcrest single-wide. It was clear. No fish, although Earl could see Holiday Lake at the other end. More of those things were coming up the rocks and across the road, and if they made it to Misty Pines, everyone who lived here was as good as dead. Right then, Earl knew what he had to do. He grabbed one of the spotlights, turned it around, shined it right in the fishmen's eyes, the ones that Jellybean hadn't ripped to shreds, and yelled, "Hey, over here!" The fishmen all locked in on the light, except for the one wearing Jellybean like a snood. Earl waved that spotlight in their fishy faces around and around until their big blind eyes followed him, like cats with a laser pointer. They clicked to each other, then lumbered toward Earl. All of them, because Granny was right. They were schooling fish. "What are you doing?" Holly said. "You go to Granny's, you hear? Don't worry about me, I got this." At least Earl hoped he did. Earl swallowed hard and kept the light pointed at the fishman's eyes as he slid into the narrow space between Edna Weebler's and the Nobies. He backed through, slow and steady, making sure the fishmen were following him, making sure he was luring them in. They followed him, all right. Unfortunately, the ones out by the water took notice of the glowing beacon that was Earl Frost, too, and they started toward him from the other direction. Earl didn't know if this was the smartest, bravest thing he'd ever done, or the dumbest, but he knew he'd be caught in the world's worst fish sandwich if he messed up. The fishman inched down the narrow space between trailers, following Earl single file. It was the only way they could fit. They hissed and swatted. Their tentacles vibrated, and Earl moved slowly, making sure they were still behind him, even though he wanted to run and scream. 50 feet had never felt so long, but Earl made it. He stepped out behind the trailer, stomped through a snowbank, and went to the road. There were fish in front of him, coming out of the ice, and behind him, coming out from between the trailers. There had to be 36 of those things. He swallowed hard, but stuck with the plan. He waved a spotlight around, screaming, "Hey, over here, look!" They all hissed and clicked, but he had their attention, so he chucked that light as hard as he could, throwing it clean over the road. He had never thrown so high or so hard in his life. All that t-ball and slow-pitch softball at the annual Misty Pines Summer Picnic had finally paid off. The spotlight arced through the sky, over the road and the rocks, and hit the lake. It skidded across the ice a ways before the snow and bumps slowed it down. Earl threw the rest of the spotlights one by one, and when the last one skidded to a stop, the icy blanket covering Holiday Lake was peppered with glowing dots. The fishman lumbered to the water's edge. "That's right. Go back where you came from," Earl whispered. He tiptoed over to the gap between the Burtness and Barney trailers. They were so close together a fishman couldn't follow him through, but before he slipped between them, Earl looked back. The fishmen stood at the shore, but they didn't go out onto the ice. They looked at the sky and clicked. Click, click, wait. Click, click, wait. That same pattern again. Then they all turned and lumbered down Main Street together. Earl slipped back to Holly's. When he walked up, she was standing on her porch, gun up, scanning the horizon. When she saw him, she jumped off her porch, ran over to Earl and squeezed him so tight his blood pressure went up. "I thought you were dead, Earl Frost." "Where's Jellybean?" Earl said. "Yeah, you know him. He loves tuna." Jellybean was sitting on that dead fishman on the porch, licking the juice out of the hole that used to be its face. "Ew," Earl said. "Are they all gone now?" Holly asked. "They won't go back in the water. It's weird." "Well, then where did they go?" "They shuffled off down Main Street," Earl said. "Well, why would they do that? Where are they going?" she asked. Earl shrugged. "I don't know." "Well, what do we do now? We can't all sit in the dark until those things decide to go home. It's almost Christmas," Holly said. "Christmas?" Earl looked at Holly. Holly looked at Earl, and they both said it at the same time. "The Christmas Light Festival." "All those people are sitting ducks. They got no idea what's coming for 'em." Granny sat on her porch, fiddling with her gun. "You two stop lollygagging and saddle up. We got a whole town to save." Chapter 9. The Cavalry Rides In a wheelchair-accessible minivan. Earl gripped the pink gun white-knuckled. He was so stressed out, he could have cracked a diamond. He stood in the gravel driveway, one eye on the two dum-dum fishmen still swiping at the light beams coming from that old tall pole over the Welcome to Misty Pines sign. The other eye was on Granny as the lift hoisted her into the wheelchair minivan. Granny's front door opened and Holly slid out. She had a bunch of crocheted tote bags over each arm stuffed full of ammo. She cleared the 3 dead bullies and the fishman with grace, then tiptoed around the porch over to Earl. She had on one of those ugly Christmas sweaters Aunt Clara had given him, the one with the Rudolph with the light-up nose on the front. But she was smart enough not to turn it on. Her hair was done, too. Not a curl or in sight. Not a trace of fish guts or brains anywhere, either. She looked glorious. "When did you have time to get gussied up?" She fluffed her bleach blonde hair and said, "I've got a few tricks. Figured if I'm going to save Christmas, I need to look the part. Never know. We might end up on the TV news. Here, lean down." Earl did. Holly produced a mini first aid kit and started disinfecting and band-aiding the cut on Earl's cheek. Then she leaned in extra close and whispered, "You sure Granny coming's a good idea? She'd be safer at home." "You want to try telling her no?" Earl said. "I don't have a death wish," she said. "Me either. If it comes to it, we lock her in, park someplace dark," Earl said. "Sounds like a plan to me. You ready?" Holly said. "No, you." "Hell no. Let's go." Well, at least they were honest. The two of them shut Granny in the van as quietly as possible. Then Earl slid behind the wheel. Holly buckled into the passenger seat. Granny said, "You got the ammo?" "As much as I could carry." Holly passed a couple bags back to her. "You did a fine job crocheting these. I'd love to learn. If we survive this, do you mind if I join your knitting club?" "Depends," Granny said. "On what?" "On how you do tonight," Granny said. "We have standards." Holly raised one eyebrow. She wasn't one to argue with an elder, even when they were talking crazy. "Get us downtown quick, Earl." "Reinforcements are on the way," Granny said. "What reinforcements?" Earl asked. Granny didn't answer. She was too busy screaming into her phone. "Sheriff Ed, listen up. A school of fish monsters is headed your way. Tell the mayor, get everyone out of downtown, you hear? And don't you dare let that Snow Queen turn on those lights." Earl could hear Sheriff Ed on the other end of the line. "Now, Marge, I can see the festival right outside my window, and there isn't a monster in sight. You've always been colorful, but let me be frank. Did you go a little too hard on the eggnog tonight?" "I'm serious, Ed. People are in danger. Get him out of the square," Granny said. "Chip and the boys came by my place to sing, and they killed—" Sheriff Ed cut her off. "Oh, they're at your place? Well, tell them to hurry downtown. They were supposed to be on stage singing Jingle Bells 5 minutes ago." "And I agree. They kill it every year, don't they? Those are some talented boys." Granny was about to tell Sheriff Ed what happened to Holiday Lake's all-star carolers, but he wouldn't let her get a word in. "Tell you what, why don't you catch a ride downtown with the boys, and you can see for yourself we're all fine here," Sheriff Ed said. "I know you Frosts aren't fond of Christmas, but a little fun would be good for you. Hell, why don't you bring Earl, too? Show him there's more to December than pouting." Sheriff Ed hung up. Help wasn't coming. "So it's all up to us then, huh?" Earl said. "Sure is. Get moving," Granny said. Earl pulled out of the driveway with the lights off and drove past the two creatures still clawing at the big light. Only one of them looked their way and hissed, but by the time it turned to swat at the taillights, Earl hit the gas and that wheelchair minivan was squealing on a main street heading for town. Holly clutched Sparky to her chest and watched the road. "I sure didn't have humanoid fish monsters attack on Christmas on my bingo card this year." "Me either," Earl said. Earl drove as fast as he could in the dark with no headlights, with only the moon to light the way, on a winding road right next to an icy lake, which probably wasn't fast enough, but the last thing he needed was to veer off and end up at the bottom of Holiday Lake. "What do you think they want?" Holly asked. "I wish I knew so we could get rid of them," Earl said. "Earl here will figure it out. He's smart. He knows fish." Granny patted him on the shoulder. "He'll crack it. I just know it." Earl wished he had Granny's confidence, but he didn't. How could he? The guys Earl looked to for the answers to this very question had tried to kill him. If Earl was too dumb to see that coming, how could he be smart enough to figure this out? He didn't know what monster fishmen were thinking. He couldn't even figure out what people were thinking. But Earl didn't say that out loud. That was the kind of thing you kept to yourself because it was humiliating. And then he'd have to explain the red satin panties. Those things were going straight into the garbage as soon as he got home, if he ever came home. They rounded a curve and Earl hit the brakes hard. "What the—" Holly lurched forward, head nearly hitting the dash, but she stopped yelling when she saw what Earl saw. They'd caught up to the fishmen. The creatures had reached the edge of town. The road hugged the shoreline, and it was dotted with cottages, all lit up in their best electric holiday finery. The fishmen were on just about every lawn and porch, ripping up Christmas lights and slicing the Jolly Yard inflatables down to shreds. Holly grabbed Earl's arm and squeezed. "There are so many of them." Earl looked at the lake. The ice seemed to be moving, undulating. "More are coming. We don't have much time. We need to warn everyone." The mayor was about to light up a million twinkling lights. When he did, those fishmen were going to swarm the square and rip up everything and everyone in it. "Hold on." Earl hit the gas. The force pushed them back in their rusty bucket seats. He sped downtown, swerving and dodging the fishmen dotting the road. Holly and Granny held onto the grab bars and prayed. Earl didn't slow down until he saw the whites of Santa's eyes. Not the real Santa, the giant one behind the stage in the town square. He hopped the curve and the engine revved hard as he ground that old minivan up the grass onto the sidewalk, filling the peppermint and mocha-scented air with blue smoke and the smell of burning oil. "Pedestrians!" Holly screamed. Earl hit the brakes, and the minivan skidded to a stop in a squeal of flimsy brake pads. When the smoke cleared, a couple of kids in blinking necklaces and puffy winter coats stood in front of it. The mom, Darlene Stump, stared at the minivan like a deer in headlights. Her expression quickly went from terror to pure rage. Darlene punched the hood and screamed, "What the hell are you doing with your lights off, speeding on the sidewalk? You could have killed us!" Earl rolled down the window and said, "Sorry." "Sorry ain't good enough," Darlene hissed. Holly rolled down her window. "He said he was sorry, Darlene. Now you take those rugrats and scoot on home, or I'll tell Harley where you really go on Thursday nights. Got it?" Darlene's jaw dropped, but she yanked those kiddos across the sidewalk right quick and didn't say another word about it. Then Holly said, "My heart's about to beat out of my chest. What were you thinking, Earl Frost?" "Well, I was thinking we had to get to that stage and warn people as fast as possible. If we'd parked and walked, it would have taken forever. We'd be too late." He pointed at the line of parked cars up and down both sides of the road, as far as the eye could see. "Fair," Holly said. Downtown was packed, wall-to-wall families wrapped in scarves, sipping hot cocoa. Just about everyone in a 3-town radius had gathered around that tiny stage in front of that giant Santa, waiting for the lights to fire up to full glory, illuminating Holiday Lake in unbridled electric joy. All eyes were on the stage. The squeal of the minivan wasn't enough to make a single person turn around. Not that they'd hear it over the holiday tunes blaring from all those new speakers. Earl could hear Gene Autry singing "Here Comes Santa Claus" clear as day, and he was out by the road inside a van with the windows rolled up. At least the town square was dim for now, illuminated only by the gentle lights twinkling in the storefronts and a few light strands zigzagging overhead. The peppermint steppers, a dozen little kids dressed as candy canes, tap-danced badly on the stage to the music. They were running out of time. As soon as those kids quit dancing, the town square would go completely dark. There'd be a drum roll, the crowd would count down, then the Snow Queen would hit big plunger like she was setting off cartoon dynamite, and the town square would light up in a blaze of light. It was glorious for sure, but Earl had to stop it. If the Snow Queen flipped that switch, it was going to be a bloodbath. "You two cover me. We don't have time to waste." Earl kicked open the door, and before his feet hit the pavement, Granny leaned up between the seats and pressed the horn with the butt of her shotgun. An anemic "meep" cut through the cold night air. A few people in the back turned around to shoot the evil eye at the van, mostly parents of the peppermint steppers, who had their phones up recording their precious little miracles bad dancing, annoyed that the horn was ruining the video. Granny yelled, "Go on, Earl, get up there and tell him what's coming." "You heard the lady." Earl ran into the crowd, pushing aside couples in matching fuzzy earmuffs and families with light-up reindeer antlers on their heads. He screamed, "Grab a weapon! Monsters are heading this way! Don't turn on the lights! Go home and lock your doors!" But the piped-in music drowned out his yells. He pushed his way to the stage. Then he marched up the stairs right up to the mayor. He snatched the microphone out of his hands and said, "Sorry to interrupt, but angry fish monsters have come out of the lake and they're going to attack us if we don't turn off all the lights. Everyone either grab a weapon and prepare to fight or take cover." The square fell dead silent. Well, except for Gene Autry. Nobody moved. Everyone stared at Earl. Even Ted and Fred, the brothers in the giant foam gingerbread man costumes outside of Beckery's Bakery, stopped dancing and looked at him with their white faux icing eyes. All the peppermint steppers looked at their parents like they didn't know if they should keep tapping or not. The lead candy cane burst into tears. "Don't just stand there. Take cover. Go home if you can. And you," Earl pointed at Bub Varney, the oldest Dirt Rotary Club president who was in charge of the pushcart full of novelty blinking necklaces and toys. "You need to cover those up or turn them all off right now. Same with anyone wearing them. The fish monsters attack anything that's bright. They'll take your head right off. Okay then, it's time to go home, lock your doors, and keep all the lights off until we figure out how to get those fish back in the water." From up here, Earl could see how much trouble the town was in. Almost everyone had on either a light-up sweater, a blinking Christmas light necklace, or was wearing a pair of twinkly reindeer antlers or snowball dealy-bobbers. Earl breathed a sigh of relief. He'd gotten here just in time. It would have been a bloodbath. Except nobody moved. "What are you waiting for? Go on, get!" The townspeople looked at each other, then at Earl, and booed. All of them. "Why are you booing me? I'm saving you," Earl said. The mayor plucked the microphone out of Earl's hand, hip-checked him out of the way, and said, "Don't worry, folks. The lights aren't canceled. We aren't going anywhere. Earl sure is a comedian, isn't he? The Scrooge of Holiday Lake strikes again. Why don't we give him a round of applause?" Most people rolled their eyes and shook their heads, just like they did at Owl's, and Earl's insides felt like lava, melting under all the judgmental stares. They thought Earl was a joke. He was trying to save them, and they thought he was a goddamn joke. The mayor went on with the show. "Without further ado, let's hand it over to this year's Snow Queen, Patty Owens." Patty the Snow Queen stepped up to the big plunger, smiling and waving. The crowd cheered. She was a sight, with her winning smile and her 3-foot-tall, bright white tiara of fiber-optic twinkling snowballs. "What are you doing? Monsters are coming this way. Don't!" Earl lunged for Patty, but a big set of hands grabbed him and stopped him dead in his tracks. Sheriff Ed. "This has gone far enough, Earl. I didn't give you a ticket when you passed out those flyers because I know you and Granny don't have much, and the fine would have been a burden. But this has gotten out of hand. You've gone too far." "The monsters are real. This isn't a joke," Earl said. Just like that time you said Bigfoot was out at the point greeting an alien ship." "That's different. I've seen these things up close. They're real," Earl said. "You said the same thing about Bigfoot and the alien," Sheriff Ed said. In Earl's defense, he did think he saw Bigfoot and an alien ship. It turned out to be a big fat old nudist with a lot of back hair. Oh, so much back hair. Walking toward his old lady, who was driving a 1976 AMC Pacer over the ridge. The way the sunlight hit all that glass and the fact that his lady had a lead foot and went airborne when she came over the hill made that Pacer look like it was a glowing flying spaceship. Earl was only 11. How was he supposed to know? "Earl isn't lying. Monsters are coming this way," Holly screamed. Earl saw her glorious halo of blonde hair pushing toward the front row, but no one listened to her either. And worse, Earl spotted white shapes at the edge of the square coming up Main Street. The fishmen were here. "Sheriff, monsters, look!" Sheriff Ed didn't look. He put Earl in a headlock instead. "If you don't cut it out, you'll be telling me all about it in handcuffs at the station." He tried to scoot Earl off the stage, but Earl dug in. Sure, he was about as effective as a cooked spaghetti noodle against Sheriff Ed's big burly body. The sheriff was as solid as a mountain, but Earl resisted anyway. He wasn't leaving this stage. "Holly, they're here! Take cover!" "Earl Frost!" Holly reached for him, but the crowd swallowed her up, and the mayor said, "Are you ready?" Everyone cheered. Drumroll poured from the speakers. "Don't do it!" Earl yelled. Patty the Snow Queen smiled a perfect pageant smile, tight at the corners, but toothy and perky, even though her eyes darted between the mayor and Sheriff Ed and Earl like she didn't know if she should keep going. Then all the lights in the square went out, apart from a single spotlight illuminating Patty the Snow Queen. Her glittery 3-foot-tall snowball tiara twinkled extra bright. Everyone awed, literally. Earl tried to wriggle free, planning to yank that plunger out of the Snow Queen's hands and toss it right off the stage, but he wasn't able to move so much as an inch. Sheriff Ed was a 6'4" immovable wall of aging muscle. Earl was big, but mostly big around. The mayor's voice cut through the otherwise dark, quiet night. "It's time, folks. Count down with me. 10, 9, 8, 7. The crowd counted down like nothing was wrong, like this was an ordinary festival. But it wasn't. They were moments away from death by angry fish. "Let me go. That stupid spotlight's going to lead those fishmen right to us," Earl said. "Shush it, Earl," Sheriff Ed said. The mayor counted down. 3, 2, 1. Patty the Snow Queen hit the plunger, and the town square lit up so bright it looked like a fiery meteor of electric Christmas joy had crash-landed in the middle of town. But the crowd was dead silent. Patty the Snow Queen screamed. A fish man stood next to her, hissing. Then it brought one giant claw down, right on her. Chapter 10. Hate to say Earl told you so, but Earl told you so. The claws came down quick. They caught on Patty the Snow Queen's 3-foot-tall blinking snowball tiara and tore it clean off her head. She stood there, eyes wide, wearing a flesh-colored sock cap that looked like pantyhose on her head. "Run!" Earl screamed. Patty the Snow Queen didn't run. She didn't scream either. She stood there as if her brain couldn't believe her eyes. Apparently, nobody else's brain could either. Sheriff Ed, the mayor, and the whole town stared at the fishman in silence as it stuffed Patty's blinking tiara wig combo into its giant spiky-toothed mouth and chomped it down until all the lights fizzled out. The peppermint steppers screamed and headed for the exit. They were the trendsetters. Everyone else followed. The crowd churned. People pushed against each other, trying to go in all directions. It was chaos. Sheriff Ed was paralyzed from shock, so Earl was able to break free. Earl grabbed Patty the Snow Queen and pulled her away from the fishman, just as its claws came down again, nearly slicing her in half. The creature wasn't trying to spear Patty, not this time. It was batting at its own face, trying to get that wig out of its mouth. It couldn't. It was stuffed in there so tight it was like the cotton in a new bottle of aspirin. Earl kicked the creature in the chest. It hit the giant Santa, and the two of them crashed to the ground. Patty the Snow Queen hopped off that stage and ran screaming faster than Earl had ever seen a beauty queen in a silver sequin bathing suit and chunky heels run. Earl grabbed the microphone out of the mayor's hand, which was easy because the mayor just stood there, lips flubbing, as the small army of iridescent white fish creatures poured into the square from all directions, attacking his voters. Earl screamed into the microphone, "Take cover! Stay in the dark! They hate the light!" The crowd sure believed Earl now. They knew he wasn't making it up, but that wasn't going to save Holiday Lake. The town square was lit up like the sun. Half the town had on blinking Christmas light necklaces and headbands, even the kids. The fishmen were going to rip them all to shreds. Earl grabbed Sheriff Ed and shook him. "We need to turn off the lights!" Sheriff Ed stared at nothing, as if he were concussed. He said, "You were right. I can't believe you were right." "Yeah, now we got to do something about it," Earl said. "Help me!" But Sheriff Ed just stood there saying, "I can't believe Earl Frost was right," over and over. So much for the long arm of the law. Earl was on his own. He went for Patty's plunger. He yanked the handle up and nothing happened, so he tried again. He pushed that dang plunger up, down, until his arms hurt, and it didn't do squat. The lights didn't even flicker. "Damn it, why isn't it working?" "It isn't attached to anything." The mayor grabbed Earl's arm. "It's all for show." "Then how do we turn off the lights?" Earl said. The mayor pointed to a bundle of cables running down and across the ground. Earl immediately jumped off the stage. He barely missed that first fish man. It was lying on its back like a stranded turtle, still clawing that cotton ball wig in its mouth. The situation wasn't better on the ground. People screamed and ran in all directions. Fishmen lumbered after them, swatting and hissing at everyone and everything bright. The creatures tore down light strings and ripped can lights out of the shrubbery, all to the cheerful tune of jingle bells blasting from the mayor's new speakers. Earl followed the big bundle of cables, dodging people and fishman with singular focus, until he heard Darlene shriek, "Get away from my kids!" Darlene Stump stood between her kids and an angry fishman who was locked in on the blinking plastic snowflake necklaces around their little necks. The creature hissed at her, claws slashing the air. The kids held onto each other and screamed, "Run! Run!" Earl shooed the kids off, but they didn't go. It's like their little snow boots were glued to the sidewalk in terror. "Leave us alone!" Darlene yelled at the fishman as she threw air punches. The giant fish was undeterred. It lunged and brought a claw down on her arm, slashing her sleeve open. White puffs of insulated stuffing fell out. The fish moved in, and Earl's heart kicked up. He wasn't going to let fish monsters destroy another family like they did his. Not today, not ever. Instinct took over. Earl ripped a giant decorative candy cane off its rebar stake, and he hooked it into the fish's mouth and yanked hard. It stumbled, but didn't fall. It righted itself and went for the kids. "Damn it!" Earl flipped the candy cane, then pushed the straight end so deep into that fish man's mouth it gucked, then stumbled into a bush. Then he ripped the blinking necklaces off the kids' necks, stepped between them and the fishman, and said, "Get him out of here, Darlene." "I owe you one, Earl." Darlene scooped them up and ran. Earl turned back to the big bundle of cables. A giant webbed monster foot stood on them. A fishman came at Earl with its arms out, like a monster in an old movie. Earl had a blinking necklace in each hand. They were like big neon signs with arrows pointing at him, saying, "Kill me, I'm here." Earl looked at the necklaces, then at the creature coming right for him, and ploop! Earl dropped the necklaces around its big, ugly head. They hung across the creature's big blind eyes, like garland across a fireplace mantle. The thing forgot all about Earl. It squealed in agony and swatted at its own face, trying to get the lights off. It couldn't, because stumpy arms. It whirled around and around, hissing until claws came down. Another fishman attacked it, not realizing the lights were attached to its friend. The two of them hissed and clicked at each other, angry tentacles writhing. Earl turned back to the cables but didn't get far, because a fishman had old Mr. Hanson cornered. It was going after the blinking Christmas tree on his sweater. The old guy had his hands up, shielding himself, but his old skinny arms weren't much defense. Earl couldn't let old Mr. Hanson die. He owned the dairy aisle down on Maple Street. The kids loved that place. It was a Holiday Lake institution. So Earl kicked the fish man square in its fat behind. It hit the sidewalk face first, a foot from Mr. Old Hanson's orthotic shoes. Stupid wife made me wear this ugly sweater. I always hated this thing. Mr. Hanson pulled the sweater off and threw it into a bush. I'm sorry I doubted you, Earl. Old Mr. Hanson hobbled off looking for cover. Earl turned back to the cables. They led to a black tent in the alley next to Al's. He made a run for it. He dodged angry fishmen and screaming running townspeople, but he made it. When he stepped in, the tent was pitch black, apart from hundreds of tiny yellow and red lights, a control board. Hello? Is anyone here? No answer. So Earl went for the board, but his foot snagged on something big and he hit the floor. Ow. He sat up to see what got him. In the soft glow of the blinking lights, Earl saw the light tech lying face down on the floor. The top of his head was dark and wet. Blood. Earl touched his shoulder. You okay, man? I can tell you right now, he is 100% not okay. The hair on the back of Earl's neck stood up. He knew that voice. It was Bucky. Chapter 11. Joining a two-bit cult is guaranteed to bite you in the butt at least 2 times. I figured you'd wander in here to ruin our plans, again, on account of your big heart and all, Bucky said. Funny, I never figured you for a hero. Guess you can't tell by looking. A pair of giant hands landed on Earl's shoulders, giant Chester hands. They lifted Earl to standing and turned him around all in one move. Bucky had that stupid Kandarian demon Ginso knife combo pointed at Earl's neck. But even more alarming, his face was totally black apart from the yellows of his 2 bloodshot eyes. Chester's face was all black too. Blackface, Earl said. You two can't be serious. You should know better. Shut up. We didn't do it on purpose. It's soot and smoke. You set my trailer on fire, remember? Bucky said. I lost everything. We barely made it out alive. Funny. I barely made it out of there alive myself, Earl said. But I'm not the one who lit a dolly candle in a trailer full of old porno mags, so you can't blame me. Oh, I do blame you. You owe me, and it's time to pay up. Bucky waved the dagger in Earl's face, and much to Earl's surprise, he wasn't scared. He was angry. Cut the shit, Bucky. Do you hear all that screaming out there? The whole town's in danger. We gotta turn off the lights. Earl reached for the control board, but he didn't get far. Chester wasn't the kind of man you could just shrug off. Oh, we're keeping the lights on. We didn't knock that guy out for nothing, Bucky said. Chester, it's time. Chester picked Earl up and tossed him over his shoulder like he was a sack of flour. Earl kicked, but it didn't matter. Chester had an iron grip. What the hell are you doing? Earl said. Finishing what we started, Bucky said. Chester carried Earl outside and smacked him down on the cement so hard Earl saw stars for a hot second. And when they cleared, the most horrific creature he had ever seen stared down at him. Ah! Oh. It was Bucky's sad papier-mâché creature from the Black Lagoon. It had survived the fire, which was a damn shame. Bucky had strapped the bas relief he'd made out of monster meat sticks to the creature's chest. They sat on a boat trailer in front of a giant black tarp covering God knows what. Chester's cousins, Timmy and Daryl, painted the sidewalk all around Earl with red spray paint. Hey, cut it out. That's vandalism, Earl said. They looked at Earl like he was stupid, and they were right this time. Vandalism wasn't Earl's biggest problem. They were painting a circle around him, and he was lying on a freshly painted tentacle design, just like the one taped to Bucky's old shag carpet. They were going to try to kill him again, and Jethro and Kyle with the sea weren't around to save him. Not this time. Earl said, Will you guys stop already? We need to save the town. It's Christmas. Yeah, and I'm getting the best present ever this year. Power and glory, Bucky said. Boys. Chester punched Earl in the face so hard, Earl saw through time and space for a split second, and when he came to, the 3 big hillbillies were holding him down. Their giant work boots rested on his shoulders and shins. A crying little kid ran by. Bucky grabbed the blinking candy cane light out of his hand, then pushed the kid face first into a snowbank. Bucky, always the humanitarian. The kid's mom plucked him out of the snow and said, You burn in hell, Bucky. You ain't nothing but trash. Then she grabbed her kid and ran. Bucky called after her, I won't be trash for long. You'll see. You'll be bowing down to me by the end of the night. He turned back to Chester and his cousins, Timmy and Daryl. Boys, prepare Earl for the ultimate sacrifice. Chester's cousin Timmy pulled a bunch of light-up blinking Christmas crap, probably stolen off of other little kids, out of a plastic bag and dumped them on Earl's chest. Bucky stepped in front of the papier-mâché creature and pointed the blinking candy cane at the nearest fish man. It lumbered toward him, hissing and clicking and swatting at the irritating light. "You're a big boy, ain't you? Come on over here. I got something for you." Earl was the something. "Are you crazy? Stop it." "Shut up, Earl. I just hope they still eat you even with all these clothes on." "Is that why you made me wear those tiny panties? Because you want to feed me to these things?" Earl squeaked. "That and we all thought it was funny." Bucky waved his blinking candy cane around like a lure. It worked. The fish zeroed in on Bucky and the blinking pile of holiday novelties that was Earl Frost. More fish followed behind. "That's right. Come on over, fellas," Bucky said. "Boys, start the chant." The hillbilly cousins kicked into another round of Mogwai, Riley, Wagnag, Flum as the fishmen lumbered toward them. Earl's heart kicked up. "You can't reason with these things. We don't even know why they're here or what they want." "I disagree." Bucky cleared his throat and started chanting. "Creatures of the dark other world, I am Bucky. Your God has chosen me as your fearless leader. Bow down to me and I will give you this world to do with as you please. As long as you remember I'm in charge." He had to talk extra loud so the fish could hear him over Ding Martin singing "Baby, It's Cold Outside," piped in via the mayor's new speakers. But it seemed to be working. The fishmen waddled toward Earl, who was blinking like a highway construction barrel. Bucky passed the candy cane to Timmy, stepped closer to Earl, and raised that Kandarian dagger Ginsu knife over Earl's heart. Rage and panic, plenty of panic, bubbled up inside Earl. After everything he'd been through tonight, he wasn't going to die because of a two-faced piece of crap like Bucky. Earl twisted and thrashed, trying to break free, but Chester and his big, dumb, meaty cousins had him pinned down pretty good. They all repeated that same made-up movie chant from back at the trailer. The growing crowd of fish monsters closed in, clicking to each other, tentacles vibrating. They came from all directions, and all eyes, fish and human, were on Bucky. He said, "Behold, I offer you this sacrifice to seal the terms of our deal with blood. I am your leader on land. Do my bidding and we can rule over the earth and the humans forever." "We need to help people, not sell them out," Earl screamed. Bucky ignored him. He repeated it all again, chanting extra loud. The things shuffled in closer like they were actually listening. If Earl weren't about to poop himself in terror, he'd have to hand it to Bucky. He really did look like the star of his own low-budget occult horror movie. He was really selling it, and the fishmen seemed to be buying it. Bucky raised his dagger and said, "Old gods from the deep, accept this sacrifice, then bow down before me." That gluck was the sound Bucky's throat made when the biggest fishman suddenly shot forward and detached Bucky's head from his neck with one slap. Well, mostly detached. Bucky's head hung on by a skin flap, upside down and backwards, staring at Earl, with a shocked expression on his face, mouth still moving. Blood shot straight up out of Bucky's neck, like a water jet at the splash pad on a hot August afternoon. Chester screamed and let go of Earl. So did Timmy and Daryl. The realization that Bucky's two-bit cult was a sham and the angry fish monsters weren't angling to make a deal sunk in fast. Earl had never seen three big men that burly and tough scream so hard or look so scared. Earl sat up. He threw off the light-up toys and kicked them as far away as possible. Chester turned and ran right into a big fish. Literally. Chester speared himself on a set of razor-sharp claws. He was stone still for a moment, with a look of wide-eyed shock on his face and a big angry fishman 2 knuckles deep in his intestines. The fishman raised his other hand and sliced Chester's arms off. The air filled with screams. Little girl screams. Earl scrambled to his feet, trying to figure out where the kids were so he could help them, but there were no little girls. It was Timmy and Daryl. They held onto each other and screamed, and the fishmen descended on them. They were surrounded. They had nowhere to run. They tried, though. Those 2 hillbillies pinballed between the fishmen, trying to escape. One sliced Timmy's belly wide open, and the poor dude watched all his guts slide out and pile up on his shoes. Daryl screamed, and a fish smacked his head clean off. It flew through the air, then landed between Earl's feet, mouth still open in a now lifeless, silent scream. Earl wanted to scream too, but clapped his hands over his mouth because he had to stay quiet or he'd be next. Daryl looked up at Earl, making hard, dead eye contact, and hot bile licked Earl's tonsils. So gross. They weren't good guys by any means, but Earl wasn't sure any man deserved that. When Timmy and Chester and Daryl's screams fell silent, the fish stopped moving. They looked at the sky and clicked. Click, click, wait. Click, click, wait. This was Earl's chance. He turned to the tent and ran right into a fishman. The thing hissed, grabbed Earl, opened its big razor teeth-lined mouth, and stuffed Earl's head right in. Boom! Clench! Hot liquid blasted Earl's skull. It felt like a high-pressure spray of hot SpaghettiOs. Boom! Clunch! Boom! Clunch! Boom! Clunch! Fishman death squeals filled the air. The fish's mouth fell away from Earl's scalp. When he opened his eyes, he was covered in a fresh head-to-toe coating of fish brains and guts. Granny sat in her wheelchair, flanked by the members of the Misty Pines Thursday Night Knitting Club. Granny Anderson, Granny Pickens, Granny Boyd, and Granny Granger. They had a pile of dead and about to be dead because grannies blew holes in their chests, fishmen lying at their feet. Each granny had a crocheted ammo bag slung across her shoulder. They looked like Granny Rambos. Granbos. Earl said, "What the heck have y'all been doing at Knitting Club?" Granny cocked her gun. "Preparing for this very day. We got a new member. She earned it." The grannies parted. Holly stood behind them, bringing up the rear. She had Sparky trained on a big fish. The creature was chasing Ted, or was it Fred, one of the foam gingerbread men, across the square. The business end of Holly's gun followed it like a sharpshooter. She fired. The fish's head exploded. She cocked Sparky and aimed it at another. This one was chasing one of the Noby brats. Boom. She blew its head right off. In that moment, Holly looked like a plus-size angel, shimmering in the glow of the Christmas lights. Sure, it was mostly the shimmer of fish blood and guts all over her hair and clothes, but still, she was glorious, and she was still alive. Earl crossed himself because it was a miracle, although Earl should have known she could handle herself. Holly dropped 2 more fishmen, casual like it was easy, before she retreated. She backed up, with Sparky still up and ready, scanning the horizon, until she hit Granny's wheelchair. She turned around and saluted the old women. "Proud to serve next to you, ladies." Then she said to Earl, "What are you waiting for, Earl Frost? Turn off those lights. We'll cover you." Chapter 12. Things go from fish to worse. The Misty Pines Thursday Night Knitting Club guarded the entrance to the tent, while Earl stood at the control board, hitting every button and switch, trying to turn off the lights. "Hurry up in there, Earl Frost." Holly stood behind Granny's wheelchair. Sparky aimed at the creatures in the square. "We got a lot of fish out here, and they're looking for trouble." "I'm trying." Earl went down the line, hitting the buttons and flipping the switches, and so far, nothing worked. "Turn off the rest of those toys, Bub Varney, or they'll be the death of you," Granny yelled. "Come on, ladies. We need to help Bub before he gets himself killed." Granny motioned for the club to follow her. She wheeled away, and they did. Even Granny Anderson, who'd been tending to the lighting tech's head wound. She patted him on the shoulder and said, "Stay quiet and you'll be just fine," before she followed Granny into the square. Only Holly stayed, gun up, guarding that tent like a commando. "Don't worry, I got you covered." Moments later, the hiss of fishmen filled the air and shots rang out. The grannies. Earl's heart kicked his ribs. He had to figure this out fast, or else they were all dead. He hit switch after switch. No luck. One made a set of lights flash and turn, making the stage look like a disco. Another made all the lights dim before they all lit back up again, brighter than before. "Which one turns them off?" Earl turned to the lighting tech. He didn't answer. He curled up on the ground and closed his eyes. Bucky and his goons had beaten him up pretty bad. Earl huffed and pounded the control board with his fists, desperate. 3 punches in, all the Christmas lights finally shut off. Earl pumped his fist. "We did it! We saved the town!" You better come have a look before you celebrate," Holly said. Earl did look. First, the good news. Most of the lights had gone out, and most of the people had been smart enough to run. The square was empty, if you only counted humans. That was the bad news. Fishmen were everywhere. They were all over the square, and they weren't leaving. They attacked the still-lit spotlights in the flower beds. They stood between the cars, blocking Main Street. Traffic was backed up in both directions. People were trapped. "There are little kids in those cars," Holly said. "What are we going to do?" "I'm thinking." Earl hoped something would come to him fast, because a little car metal and window glass wasn't going to hold those things off for long. Earl scanned the square, praying for divine inspiration. Then his eyes landed on Bub Varney's cart. All the toys were dark. Not a single plastic snowflake necklace or reindeer headband was lit. Bub and the grannies were nowhere in sight. They'd shut it all down and gotten the heck out of Dodge. "I've got an idea. Come on." Earl grabbed Holly by the glorious flub of her arm. "Stay quiet. Keep that gun ready. Don't shoot unless you absolutely have to." Earl pulled Holly close, and the two of them stepped over the remains of Bucky, Chester, and Chester's cousins, Timmy and Daryl. Then they slid across the square, staying quiet and in the shadows. The sound of their footsteps was drowned out by the dulcet tones of George Michael's voice singing Last Christmas, pouring from the mayor's fancy new sound system. "I can't believe this is how I lost Whamageddon," Holly whispered. "I was so careful." They gave every fish they came across wide berth. Most of the fish were ripping up spotlights and didn't notice them. A few weren't clawing at anything. They either squealed high and shrill or clicked. Click, click, wait. Click, click, wait. Same pattern as before, except somehow the clicking seemed more desperate. "Is something wrong with them?" Holly asked. "Are they sick?" "I don't know. Come on, help me quick." Earl pulled Holly over to Bub Varney's cart. He grabbed a bunch of necklaces and looped them around his neck. "What's the plan?" Holly asked. "You stay in the dark and cover me," he said. "I'll get the fish off the road so the cars can drive away." "You sure about this?" "No, but like you said, there are kids down there," Earl said. "Just keep Sparky ready, and if things go really wrong, run." "Okay, but you take care, you hear me?" "I will." Earl grabbed 2 big plastic candy canes. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." Holly raised Sparky. The two of them slipped over to Becky's bakery together. Holly took cover by the door. Earl tiptoed toward the road, slow and quiet, novelty toys unlit, moving as quickly and quietly as he could. He was wound up tight as a spring coil from the terror, but the trek was easier than he expected. Some of the fishmen focused on the can lights, crunching them down to nothing. Others just stood there squealing and clicking and wobbling. Maybe Holly was right. Maybe they were sick. Earl made it to Main Street just as Bobby Ames, the beefy jerk who maintained the grass over at the country club, snapped. He laid on the horn of his giant black pickup truck, and a particularly large fishman had sunk its claws into the hood and sliced it to ribbons, attacking the reflection of the streetlight. Bobby poked his head out of the driver's side window and yelled, "Damn it! This is a $70,000 truck! I didn't work hard so some big dumb fish could come along and rip up the fruits of my labor." "Bobby, shut up!" Earl waved his arms and whisper screamed, trying to get his attention. Didn't work. Bobby was focused on that fish. No surprise. The whole town knew Bobby spent all his spare time buffing and waxing that truck. He showered it with way more love and affection than he ever did his wife or kids, which was why she was his soon-to-be ex-wife. The fishman didn't stop, so Bobby kicked open the truck door and stomped up to it, wielding a tire iron. "Get back in the truck, Bobby!" Earl screamed. Bobby didn't know what he was up against. He hadn't seen these things take 3 men's heads off in one swat. "Shut up, Earl. This has gone on long enough. I got this." Bobby lifted his tire iron and brought it down on the fish. It didn't even flinch. Those scales were thick. This made Bobby angrier. He raised the iron again and wound it up like he was about to hit a fastball into left field. "You watching, Earl? I'm about to show you how a real man gets things done. Stupid fish!" Gah! The creature's claws came down before Bobby said the ish in fish. They split his skull into a mess of blood, tissue, and sinew, like Christmas ribbon candy with chunks of brain and eyeballs stuck in it. The fish pulled its claws out, and Bobby's body thunked to the ground. Beep! The dad driving the silver sedan, stuck behind Bobby's giant pickup truck, parked not so politely across a lane and a half, laid on the horn. "Jesus, I told y'all to stay quiet. Do you want to die?" Earl said. That fishman lumbered up and punched the sedan's windshield so hard the glass cracked, and the reindeer car antlers fell off the top. The kids in the back seat shrieked in terror. Poor Mom and their dumbass dad crawled over the front seat to get away from the angry fish. Earl crossed himself and prayed to sweet baby Jesus or whoever was listening that his plan would work, because it was now or never. He clicked on all of Bub Varney's blinking novelty toys, turning himself into a glowing, chubby beacon of plastic holiday joy, or more accurately, a man-sized LED fishing lure with more beer belly than he cared to admit. The fish man raised its hand and was about to bring its claw down on the terrified family's windshield again. This time the glass would break for sure, and those kids would be goners. So Earl screamed, "Here, fishy, fishy!" He jumped up and down. "Here, fishy, fishy, fishy!" Okay, so it wasn't a movie-ready battle cry. It was no yippee-ki-yay, mother effers, but it was all Earl could come up with in the moment. Plus, Earl couldn't say the real R-rated version of the die-hard battle cry, even in his head. The power of Granny's soap was that strong. "Here, fishy, fishy, fishy!" Earl screamed louder and moved closer to the fishman attacking the sedan. It looked at Earl. Its tentacles vibrated. It hissed at him and turned away from the car. The mom inside put her mittened hands over her kids' mouths to muffle their screams. Then she smacked her husband for being stupid enough to lay on the horn. "Here, fishy, fishy, fishy!" Earl yelled, louder, clearer. All the creatures on the road turned away from the cars and focused on Earl. Their tentacles vibrated. They clicked to each other. Earl swallowed hard and kept jumping, waving the blinking candy canes. "Here, fishy, fishy, fishy!" The fishmen lumbered toward Earl as if they were of one mind, because Granny was right. They were schooling fish, and they were coming right for him. Earl swallowed hard. He was terrified, but he kept dancing and singing like a man lure, because he had to clear the road. He had to give everyone a chance to escape. As the thing shuffled toward Earl, the screams in the cars stopped. Engines kicked up, tires squealed, cars pulled away one by one as soon as the patch of road in front of them cleared. The traffic jam slowly unjammed, except for Bobby's big dumb truck still running in the middle of the street. Earl jumped and hooted and hollered and waved those candy cane lights, staying just out of reach of the fish until all the cars pulled away. "Earl Frost!" Holly's voice cut through the night. Boom! She fired. Earl turned around. A headless fishman dropped right behind him. Earl didn't even see him coming. And worse, Earl was so bright he was luring fish out of the town square, too. They were coming from both directions. He was surrounded. "I hope you know what you're doing. That plan of yours better be good," Holly said. It wasn't. This was it. He'd run out of plan, and now he was neck deep in Shit Creek. "Don't just stand there, run," Holly said. You heard the woman. But everywhere Earl looked, there were fish coming right at him. He was too bright. He pulled the necklaces off and chucked them onto a snow pile a few feet away. He threw the candy canes, too. Then Earl squatted down quick. Claws flew. Creatures sliced the empty air where he stood just seconds before. He stayed low and small, eye to eye with scaly white fish knees and Bobby's bloody stump of a head. And suddenly, Earl had an idea. When the fish went for the blinking pile of plastic on the snow, Earl moved. He crabbed walked, thighs burning, over to Bobby's corpse. Bile tickled his tonsils. Earl had never liked Bobby, but this was hard to see. Earl slid past Bobby's body to the truck and climbed up in the driver's seat. He crossed himself and thanked Bobby for his hard work and desire to overcompensate for his bad personality with a powerful vehicle. Shots rang out. Holly was in trouble. Earl hit the gas. The engine revved, and he plowed through a couple big fishmen, bounced over a snowbank and up the curb, and sped across the square, running down every fish in his path as he raced toward Holly. They were like scaly, armored speed bumps. Big ones. He bounced up off the seat and hit his head on the ceiling, and the air filled with a wet, chopping grind as the fishmen got chewed up in the wheel wells. Chunks of fish guts and blood splattered the windows. The wipers couldn't keep up. More shots rang out. Holly! Earl's heart raced. He was driving blind, but he kept going until he took out a light pole, which fell in the hood, sparking and fizzing. Then he clipped a raised stone flower bed, and the passenger side tipped up. He pressed the gas, but the truck didn't move. A horrible grinding sound and oily smoke filled the air instead. Earl opened the door and made a run for it. Something came over him. Adrenaline? Fear? He didn't know, but he'd never been so focused in his whole life. All that mattered was Holly. He sprinted toward Becky's bakery, kung fu kicking fishmen out of the way like a cut-rate Bruce Lee. He found Holly backed up against Al's front window, surrounded by fishmen, gun up, terror writ large on her face. "Earl Frost! Holly!" Earl kicked a fish out of the way, then grabbed her and held her close. He turned, ready to run her out of there, but the gap he'd made was gone. The fishmen had closed ranks. "The sound of the gun drew him in. I tried not to shoot, but there were so many and they were getting too close," she said. "What are we going to do now?" "We're going to get out of here, that's what." Earl's eyes darted all around, looking for a way. But the situation was worse. The sound and spectacle of him running Bobby's truck up through the square had drawn the fishmen off the road back into the square, and they were agitated, clicking wildly and hissing like they knew Earl had turned their buddies into chum. "How much ammo do you have left?" Earl whispered. "I'm all out." That was not the news he was hoping for. They couldn't shoot their way out, and they couldn't run. They were backed into the little portico around Al's front door. The door was locked. The store was dark, closed. Help wasn't coming. "Hold me tight," Holly said. Earl did. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I failed." "You didn't fail. You were really brave out there," she said. "It may be over for us, but we did our best. We saved a lot of people. I'm proud of you." "I just wish you were safe at home and it was just me out here," he said. "I don't." Holly grabbed his face and brought it to hers. "I would have been dead in my trailer hours ago if it weren't for you. You saved me, and you saved a town square full of people. You got nothing to regret, and neither do I." Earl looked at Holly's beautiful face, and the remains of cheese puff dust on her lips reminded him of what could have been if the school of angry fishmen had stayed at the bottom of the lake where they belonged. But they didn't, so here they were. The fish moved in clicking. Holly tried hard to keep her eyes on Earl. He could tell she was scared. "Holly." He locked eyes with her one last time. "Yes?" She looked up at him, and she was as beautiful as the first day he saw her, outside, poking those pink plastic flamingos into her flower pot. "I love you, and I've loved you since the very first time I laid eyes on you." Earl might as well say it. He had nothing to lose now. He wanted to kiss her, even though their faces were covered in fish guts. He wanted to, but he didn't, because the few precious moments he would have spent tasting her glorious cherry chapstick and cheese dust lips would be better spent sacrificing himself for her so she could have a chance to live. He stepped in front of her and faced the fish. "When I say run, you hear me?" He was going to be loud, make a fuss, give her a chance. The fishmen were so close, Earl could smell their fishy breath. Death by claw was seconds away. The things hissed and clicked, tentacles vibrating. "Get ready to run," his chest puffed. He put his arms out and drew in a breath, ready to scream at the fish, ready to distract them. Too late. The creatures pulled him backward fast. He screamed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to save her, but the fish had other plans. Chapter 13. What a Fish Man Needs. Earl's back hit the ground and his fists flew. He punched every fish he could as hard as he could. He wasn't going down without a fight. "Please stop punching me," a low man voice said. Earl opened his eyes. Kyle with a C, face black with soot, loomed over him. So did two teal-blue eyelids surrounded by a halo of orange hair. Maddie Pickens smacked her gum and said, "Looks like we got you just in time. You need a new bandage, though. You're bleeding through." Maddie Pickens pulled out a pack of alcohol swabs and handed a big pack of Band-Aids to Kyle with a C. Maddie started swabbing. Earl's face stung as she cleaned the cut on his cheek. Earl still couldn't believe he was alive. He was inside Al's. There were voices all around, short, clipped, giving orders like, "Hurry up, bolt the door, quiet down." Scared faces cowered in the dark. The mayor, his secretary Gloria, Bub Varney and the rest of the Rotary Club. People in the aisles held on tight to their kids and each other. The grannies and Jethro, also covered in soot, guarded the windows, guns up and ready. Fishmen milled around outside, clicking. Click, click, wait. Click, click, wait. They were ignoring the humans. For now. "Where's Holly?" Earl asked. Maddie thumbed behind her. Holly lay on the floor, staring up at the acoustic ceiling tiles, clutching Sparky to her chest. Ted and Fred, still in their thick foam gingerbread man outfits, knelt next to her, checking for injuries. Earl could breathe again. "Thank God she's alive." "No thanks to you." Granny rolled up, angry finger wagging. "What were you two doing out there standing around? We were waiting for you to come in. Didn't you hear us fiddling with the lock? What was your plan?" "I didn't know anyone was in here. It was dark." "Of course it's dark. Rule number 1 of the Christmas Fishman apocalypse is stay in the dark." "Sheesh," she said. Well, now Earl felt stupid. "You're lucky we got you before they did," she said. "Now pull yourself together. We got work to do." Earl stirred, but Maddie Pickens huffed. "Quit squirming." She pulled a fresh new Band-Aid tight over the cut on Earl's face. "There, all done. Now you can go." "Thanks," he said. "Least I could do." Maddie Pickens winked one of her big blue eyelids. Kyle with the C put out a big meaty hand and pulled Earl to standing. Thanks again, man. I owe you big time, Earl said. Kyle with the C nodded like it was nothing, even though he'd gotten Earl out of 2 life or death spots today. Holly sat up and locked eyes with Earl. Earl went for her but didn't make it. Granny Anderson stepped between them. Lesson 1 of knitting club, besides don't talk about knitting club, is always carry extra ammo. She took Sparky from Holly and reloaded it. What were you doing out there without your bag? Never go into battle unprepared. We didn't spend all those Thursday nights knitting these things for nothing. Here. Granny Anderson handed Holly a very full crocheted ammo bag. Then she turned to Earl and said, Well, hun, what's the plan? The store went dead silent. Every eye in the place was on Earl. He hesitated. Why were they looking at him? He didn't know any more than they did. He'd already done everything he could think of. Don't just stand there. Say something. Abby Meyer's voice shook with panic. She hugged her little kindergartner. Why are they still out there? We turned off all the lights. Why won't they leave? It was true. The lights were off. It was dark outside, but the fishmen still weren't heading toward the water. They still weren't going home. Earl didn't know why. A lump formed in his throat. That kindergartner looked terrified. He was the same age Earl was when he lost his dad to these things. And looking at that kid, eyes wide, clinging to his mom like plastic wrap, well, the gravity of what was at stake hit Earl like an 18-wheeler. How do we get him to go away? How do we get him to leave us alone? Abby Meyer asked. Why are you looking at me? I don't know. It was the truth. No point in lying. What do you mean you don't know? You were the one who handed out these flyers. You got to know something. Old Artie Sweeney, who owned the muffler shop on Logan Street, pulled one of Bucky's flyers out of his back pocket. I've read this thing 100 times, and I can't make heads or tails of it. Tell us what it means. Tell us what we have to do. Earl looked at that crumpled flyer, and something inside him broke. I don't know, okay? I've done everything I can think of, and they're still here, Earl said. You all can forget Bucky. He sold us out. He was out there telling those things that could kill us all as long as he got to be king. Bucky was nothing but a 2-bit scammer and a traitor, and now he's out there headless. Old Artie Sweeney crumbled the flyer and threw it in the trash. I thought one of you knuckleheads would know something, but I guess not. Now we're all gonna die. Nervous chatter filled the air. Then Marcia King stepped out of aisle 2, clutching her Bible to her chest, and said over the buzz, I know what they want, and I know why they're here. Everyone shut up. We're being punished for the sins of all you unbelievers. God is angry with us. We must sacrifice the sinners and be cleansed, Marcia said. I told you this would happen. I told you all to go to church. Everyone either rolled their eyes or groaned. Marcia King had been a Bible-thumping drag in head-to-toe gray wool since before Earl was born. She was even more of a Scrooge than Earl. She only came to the Christmas Lights Festival every year to lecture everyone about keeping the Christ in Christmas, lest they all burn in hell for eternity. The eye rolls fueled her. She raised one hand in the air like she was waiting for a divine cloud to part and anoint her the chosen one. Then she said, We must repent and give God a sacrifice. You! Marcia pointed to Ethan Carter, a tween with a bad haircut, who was playing games on his phone. Come forward! You are the sacrifice! Marcia said. Ethan looked up from the screen long enough to say, Huh? One trick-or-treat night, you took the fake $5 bill from my hand, saw that it was the divine word of Jesus, then threw it in my bushes like trash, Marcia said. The word of God is a treasure greater than money or candy. It was a test and you failed. You're a sinner and a litterer and just plain rude. We must cast him out. We must give him to the beasts and be saved. Ethan's mom stepped in front of him, ready to fight. Can it, Marcia? No one is sacrificing anyone. Granny parked her wheelchair in front of Ethan. Now shut up and sit down or I'll shove that Bible so far up your ass you'll be shitting psalms for a week. Surprisingly, Marcia did shut up under the wilting stares of the townspeople. She wasn't happy about it, though. Her mouth clenched up so tight her lips looked like Jellybean's butthole. She clutched her Bible to her chest, lifted her nose haughtily, and retreated back into the darkness of aisle 2. If Earl was looking for a silver lining, at least the grocery store didn't turn into an old-fashioned witch hunt. But everyone still wanted answers and a plan, and those were the 2 things they didn't have. It shut Marcia up, but started barking and snipping at each other instead. Everyone calm down, Granny said. Old Artie Sweeney pointed at the window and said, How can we calm down? Look at them! What are they doing out there? The fishman's tentacles vibrated. They wobbled and hissed, so unsteady on their feet they walked like they were on the deck of a ship in rough seas. They swatted at their ears. Then the ground shook, and so did everything in the store. Another tremor. Gasps and screams rose from the aisles. Earl ran. He had to get away from all the people looking at him like he'd let them down. He didn't stop until he was in the back, standing at the sporting goods counter alone. He breathed deep, trying to calm down. It didn't work. His brain buzzed. Earl Frost, the Scrooge who hated Christmas, was now the guy who couldn't save his town on Christmas. It felt terrible. "What's wrong?" Holly had followed him. She put her hand on his shoulder and words fell out of him like he'd popped a cork. "I don't know why everyone thinks I have a plan. I don't know what those things want. I don't know what to do," he said. "I did everything I could think of, but we're all going to die anyway, and it's all my fault." "Stop. This isn't your fault," she said. "You've already done more than any of these people. You were out there running around covered in lights while they were hiding in the dark. But you heard them. They think I have the answers because of Bucky's stupid flyers. They're just scared is all," she said. "Doesn't change anything. I don't know what those things want. I don't know why they won't go back in the lake, and we're trapped in here until I figure it out." "You mean until we figure it out," she said. "It isn't just up to you. It's up to all of us." "Maybe, but I've been taking care of fish my whole life," he said. "You'd think I'd know something by now, something that could help us." "Those things outside ain't goldfish, sugar. You need to be kinder to yourself." "Maybe," he said. "Definitely. Speaking of, we need to talk." Holly put her hand on Earl's cheek and moved his gaze to hers. "Did you mean what you said outside?" Earl broke out into a cold sweat. He had told Holly he loved her, and that wasn't something you could unsay. Those words came with consequences. He meant it all right, but he also knew what ladies meant when they said, "We need to talk." It meant she didn't feel the same. He couldn't take the rejection right now. It would break him, so he turned away. "Don't think another thing about it. It was nothing." He wiped a tear away and saw eyes, tiny eyes in cups staring at him. A dozen goldfish sat on the clearance rack in the same spot Earl had cleared out earlier. Al's had restocked. "Damn it, Al!" Earl's hands balled into fists. And suddenly, Mariah Carey's high-pitched Christmas song screech cut through the air, and the clearance shelf lit up in a spinning spray of green lights. Those poor fish were on the same shelf as the display of Bluetooth speakers with the little plastic disco domes on top. Their water cups looked like the dance floor in a John Travolta movie. The goldfish did somersaults, trying in vain to run from the relentless squeal of Mariah. Earl pawed at the speakers, looking for power buttons, but the music didn't stop until the zitty teen who'd sold Earl ammo earlier stepped into the aisle and said, "Sorry. My mom told me if I didn't answer when she called, I was grounded, so I connected my phone to all the Bluetooth speakers so I could hear her no matter where I was in the store." A few seconds later, the kid said, "Hi, Mom," and all the speakers went silent. Earl's insides boiled. "Can you believe this? They restocked. I told them they shouldn't sell fish if they can't take care of them. Everyone knows you don't put speakers next to your aquarium. Fish can't stand loud music. It messes with their organs. It can kill them," he said. "It isn't hard. Fish need the same things we do: food, clean water, a safe, peaceful place to live." Earl stood up stick straight and watched as one of the goldfish settled back down in his tiny cup of dirty water, looking worse for wear thanks to Mariah Carey. "I think I've got it." "Got what?" Holly said. Earl didn't answer. He went to the front window and looked out at the fishmen. Some of them wobbled and swatted at their ears, unsteady on their feet. Some of them clicked at the sky. Some of them swatted at the air. No, not the air. The speakers. Pieces clicked together in Earl's brain. Earl's eyes went to the icy expanse of Holiday Lake, then to the tall evergreen trees on the distant shore. The sky flickered orange and blue behind the pines. The fracking plant. He replayed Granny's story about Great-Grandpa's death. The mine, the dynamite, the lantern. Then he replayed his encounter with the fishman in Holly's yard. They fell over themselves before the tremors. "Jethro," Earl said. Jethro stepped forward. "Your cousin Benny still work at the plant?" Jethro nodded. "Call him." Jethro fished his phone out and dialed. Earl turned to Al. "You got anything here we can light up really bright? Something big. Something the fish can't ignore." "We might have just the thing." Al headed to the storeroom. "You," Earl pointed at the zitty teen. "Cue up that Mariah song. Play it for a couple seconds, then turn it off, okay? I want to test something." The kid looked unsure. So did Holly. She'd caught up to Earl. "You sure about this?" "No, that's why we're going to test it," Earl said. The store went silent. All eyes were on Earl. He pressed the disco speaker to the glass window. The Zitty Kid tapped his phone, and a moment later, Mariah Carey's highest holiday high note poured from the speaker in a whirl of blinking disco lights. The fish man closest to the window wobbled and hissed, swatting the air so hard it nearly fell over. When the music stopped, Jethro said, "Something bad is happening at the plant. Listen." He held up his phone. A crackle of explosions, hisses, and screams poured out. Everyone gasped. Half of the town had loved ones working out there. Earl turned back to the window. He looked the fishman up and down with an analytical eye. The claws on fat webbed paws, perfect for digging. The blind white eyes, sensitive to light. They were like moles with gills. "What are you thinking, son?" Granny rolled up. "Cave fish," Earl said. "They're blind and snow white. They're designed for the dark, for digging in the muddy bottom. They weren't ever meant to come up to the surface to be in the light." "Then why are they here?" she asked. "It's just like you said, Granny. The year they killed Great-Grandpa, we were blasting too deep in the mine. And now here we are again, blasting too deep. But we never had this many before, and they never came so far out of the water," Granny said. "What changed?" "Maybe this time is worse. Maybe the plant blasted so deep it blew them all out," Earl said. "That or it's the tremors. They know they're coming before we do. Maybe that's why they won't go home." "But why are they trying to kill us?" Holly asked. "Maybe everything up here's too much for them," Earl said. "All the loud music and the light. It's disorienting. Maybe it's making them sick. Maybe they're attacking because they want peace." "So what do we do?" Holly asked. "They want to go back home, so we've got to help them," Earl said. "Well, how the hell do we do that?" Holly said. "First we shut down the plant. Then we show them the way." Chapter 14. The plan goes to the dogs, or rather, to the gingerbread. The squeak of snow boots on linoleum filled the air as everyone shuffled around, getting ready. Al took the shotguns off the display rack and sporting goods and handed them out. The grannies stood guard over the windows. Jethro and Kyle with the C wrestled football shoulder pads over their sooty cult robes. Earl stood by the door, one hand on a pallet jack, the other patting down the thick beige foam of his gingerbread man costume, looking for his lighter. Yep, Earl was a gingerbread man. Ted handed over the costume without argument. The cookie-shaped foam was silly, but it was also thick, flexible, and it offered a lot more protection than Granny's snowman stretch pants and Aunt Clara's clearance rack Christmas sweater. When Earl felt the lighter, still tucked snug in his waistband, his shoulders relaxed. The lighter was the key to everything. Because Al did have just what they needed to grab the fish's attention. New Year's Eve fireworks, stacked on a pallet jack so high Earl couldn't see over it, enough to light up the Northwood sky like the 4th of July. Earl was going to wheel it outside and make a scene the locals, fish and human, would never forget. Earl ran through the plan in his head a few more times, trying not to think about what would happen if it all went sideways. Then he said, "Is everybody ready?" "No, I can't move in these." Kyle with a C threw his pads to the floor. Then he grabbed the sleeves of his robe and ripped them clean off with one yank, revealing his massive milky white arms. "Whew, that's better. I hate sleeves. They're arm cages." "But it's freezing out there," Jethro said. "I've got plenty insulation." Kyle with a C patted his belly, then stretched his now naked arms. "We're ready," Granny said. She and the other grannies, guns loaded, ammo bags slung over their shoulders, had a look of grim determination on their faces. They looked like an elite military unit that had been training for this moment for years, because they were, in a way. Turns out Granny's Knitting Club was really a disaster preparedness group that happened to make useful ammo-related handicrafts. The old ladies had turned Earl's ideas into a solid, actionable plan in under 15 minutes. It was surprisingly good for morale. If a bunch of wrinkled old ladies were brave enough to go outside and fight a bunch of fish monsters, nobody else had an excuse. Kyle with a C finally made it into his shoulder pads and saluted Granny. "I'm ready, boss." She said, "Are you two sure Jethro's truck is big enough to run over however many of those things stand between you and the plant?" "Sure is." Jethro jingled the keys. "You two got your emergency supplies?" Granny asked. They checked their tool belts one more time. Flare guns, clearance rack Bluetooth speakers with disco domes on top, Mariah Carey Christmas CD, pistols, loaded, and some muscle, just in case. Kyle with a C lifted a giant sledgehammer and parked it on his shoulder. "What are you going to do with that?" Granny asked. "Don't know yet. Can't hurt might help. Okay then, as long as it doesn't slow you down, Granny said. You two got a plan B if things go bad out there? Sure do, Kyle with a C said. Worst comes to worst, I'll shut that plant down with a bang. He winked, and everyone was sensible enough not to ask for details. Best to let things slide with killer fishmen on the loose. All right, you two better get going, Granny said. Al came forward, hands shaking, holding a ring of keys. You two should go out the back, delivery entrance. Hopefully there won't be as many, Al looked at the window, at the mob of sharp-toothed fishmen outside and swallowed hard. You two better get. Won't be fewer of them as time goes on. Granny shooed him off. Al nodded, and the three of them went to the back of the store. They disappeared through a set of metal swing doors. We're ready. The mayor, outfitted in hockey goalie pads, pushed a wheelbarrow out of aisle 3. His secretary, Gloria, lay in it. She'd been the secretary for more mayors than Earl had fingers. She knew City Hall inside and out. She was crucial to the mission. The wheelbarrow was the fastest way to get her from here to there. Gloria was as big around as she was tall and looked worse for wear. Her silver-purple wig was hanging on by a thread, and she'd broken the chunky white patent leather heel off of one of her dress shoes. She said, Sorry, y'all. If I'd have known we'd be fighting monsters tonight, I would have worn my tennis shoes. Don't you worry. We'll get you to City Hall. I'll make sure of it. Maddie Pickens lifted a tiny handgun out of her blue sequin purse and patted Gloria on the leg. Gloria wagged her finger at the mayor. Next time you pay 10 grand for a sound system, you pay attention when the installers show you how to use it. I can't be the only one. It's a security issue. 10 grand? Old Mr. Hanson yelped. He wasn't the only one who gasped when Gloria mentioned the price tag. Now, everyone. Holiday Lake is a tourist destination, and this kind of thing adds to the ambiance. It keeps people coming back, spending money, year after year. The mayor's voice was soothing, always the politician. Why, we had a 10% increase in foot traffic in the square this year, and the music was a big part of that. It's an investment that will pay for itself. We also had a 100% increase in killer fishmen, Maddie Pickens said. I don't see any of them whipping out their credit cards. The mayor was smart enough to zip his lips and wheel Gloria to the front door. Earl tugged at the fake icing smile in his gingerbread suit and prayed. They were going to need all the help they could get, Divine included. All right, everyone knows their jobs? Granny addressed the troops. They all nodded. Everyone got their speakers and weapons? They all nodded. Granny looked at Earl. Earl looked at Granny. They were as ready as they were ever going to be. All right, no time like the present. Let's do this, Granny said. Wait, you aren't going out there without me. A second gingerbread man pushed through the crowd. Holly's face poked out of the icing smile. She held that pink gun to the faux candy buttons on her foam gingerbread chest and stepped up next to Earl. Earl didn't want her to go, but he could tell by the look on her face he couldn't stop her. Granny Anderson said, Open on 3, and started the countdown. This was it. They had a plan, and it was now or never. On 1, Granny Anderson unlocked the front door, leaned out, and fired the flare gun. Fizzing red light shot through the square. The fish's watery blind eyes followed the light. The flare hit a big one in the chest. The massive beast squealed and fell over. All the creatures hissed. Sorry, didn't mean to hit one, Granny Anderson said. Doesn't matter, it's working, Granny said. The fishmen waddled toward their fallen friend, clearing a path between Owls and City Hall. It wasn't much of a path, but it was enough. Misty Pines Thursday Night Knitting Club, to your posts! Granny waved the grannies out the door, and they all lined up along the front window, guns up, like snipers. Granny wheeled after them, but Earl stopped her before she went out. You sure? I feel better if you stayed inside. Son, it's up to the old folks to lead the way. You kids are supposed to learn what to do by watching us. And my generation hasn't always been good role models, but that changes tonight, she said. I love you, Earl, and I want you and everyone else in here to live a long, good life, even if it means mine ends. That's why I've got to go. I love you, Granny. Earl blinked his tears away. Promise me you'll come back safe. I can't promise that, but no matter what happens, I love you. Don't ever forget. She wheeled outside and joined the other granny snipers. Maddie Pickens went out next, pistol up, followed by the mayor and his wheelbarrow full of Gloria. Gloria activated her Bluetooth speaker, and the high-pitched squeal of Mariah Carey on repeat cut through the night. Every fishman in earshot retreated from the high note. As the three of them wheeled toward City Hall, the fish seemed powerless against the music. One of them flopped on the pavement like a walleye that had just jumped out of a cooler. The store was pin-drop silent. All eyes were on Gloria, Mattie Pickens, and the mayor as they moved across the square, slow and steady. Mariah Carey on full blast, drowning out the speakers, her high-pitched Christmas squeal neutralizing the fishy threat. "I can't believe that worked. You're a genius," Holly whispered. She'd spoken too soon. A wall of fishmen suddenly closed ranks behind the mayor, Mattie Pickens, and Gloria. All Earl could see was scaly white behinds. Then came the sound of Gloria's scream and the toot of Mattie firing her tiny pistol. The grannies lifted their shotguns, aimed and fired, and the square erupted in booms and fish shrieks. "Artie, open the door. We're going out," Earl said. Artie Sweeney shuffled over to the door and opened it. Earl grabbed the handle of the pallet jack and started pushing the fireworks out. "That's not the plan, Earl Frost." Holly held him back. "We're supposed to wait until they put Mariah on all the speakers." "That might never happen. We gotta go now. If we light these up, they might stand a chance." Earl pushed the fireworks forward, but stopped when Bub Varney stepped in front of him. "What are you doing, Bub?" Earl said. "Get out of the way." Bub didn't. He saluted everyone and said, "Godspeed." Then he ran out the front door. Holly called after him, "Bub Varney, you get back in here right now before you get yourself killed." He didn't listen. He screamed, "I love you, Gloria. I'll save you." Romantic, until he smacked into a fishman and bounced off its butt like a rubber ball. He hit pavement and lay on his back for a second, stunned. Everyone in the store watched, too terrified to scream. A couple of the fishmen went for him. The grannies aimed, but Bub popped up before they fired. He dodged the attacking fish and ran to his cart. He turned on plastic necklaces and blinking snowflake wands, hands moving so fast they were a blur. He was a pro. He had everything lit in under a minute. The fishmen immediately changed direction, abandoning the wheelbarrow full of Gloria. They descended on Bub instead. He disappeared behind a wall of white scales as he screamed, "Run, Gloria, run!" "Artie, the door," Earl said. "Holly, cue the Mariah." Holly turned on the little speaker dangling from her faux candy buttons, then clutched Sparky to her foam cookie chest. Earl pushed the pallet jack toward the door. "It's not too late to stay behind." "I wouldn't dream of it." "Then here goes nothing." "Wait, for luck." Holly kissed him on the cheek. Earl blushed and his knees went a little wobbly, but he straightened up and stayed the course. "Lock the door the second we're out," Earl said to Artie. "Something goes wrong, stay in the dark and stay quiet." Artie nodded and Earl pushed the fireworks outside. He held on white-knuckled and steered toward the lake. It wasn't easy. The square sloped gently toward the water, and he maneuvered the pallet around downed Christmas lights, overturned plastic candy canes, the stray fishmen making their way up to Bub's cart, and Bobby's wrecked pickup truck. One bad bump or false move, and the fireworks would tip, scatter, and the plan would be shot. The pallet jack didn't have good brakes. The cart gained speed, going faster as it headed downhill. Earl had to run to keep up. His legs ached and needles filled both his lungs. Between this and Bucky, he'd run more tonight than he had in his whole life. But he kept going, so fast the foam of his gingerbread thighs rubbed together, burning hot. His brave gingerbread lady ran right along beside him. The two of them steered that pallet jack through the town square, dodging fish and upturned Christmas decorations. Mariah poured from the tiny speaker, tied to Holly's faux candy buttons, stunning every fish close enough to hear it. They made it all the way to Main Street. It was a small miracle. That's when the air filled with the squeal of tires and the rumble of a big exhaust pipe, followed by the thump-thump of Jethro's truck using fishmen for speed bumps. Jethro and Kyle with a C didn't make it to the plant. They made it a few blocks up Main Street, and the fish had them surrounded. Jethro revved his engine, cracked the windows, and cranked up the Mariah Carey on the stereo, then tried to push through the school of fish in front of him. But he couldn't. The creatures were disoriented, but there were just too many of them. "Hold him off, Jethro. I got this." Kyle with a C screamed and kicked open the passenger door, hitting two fishmen out of the way. Kyle with a C judo rolled across the pavement, sending fish flying like bowling pins. Then he popped up and started running. He ran out onto Holiday Lake, across the ice, sledgehammer in his big pasty arms, which were stark white in the light of the moon. He ran straight across the middle, toward the trees on the far bank, toward the fracking plant. "What the hell is he doing? He'll never make it," Holly whispered. "He will if I can help it. Come on, we're out of time." Earl and Holly pushed the pallet jack toward the boat dock, which was up to the boards and ice on all sides. Holly pointed Sparky at whatever fish was the closest, ready to fire just in case. Shots rang out behind them. Something's wrong. The music hasn't changed. Mariah's supposed to be on by now. They didn't make it to City Hall. We have to go back. We have to help them, Holly said. The best way to help them is to stick to the plan and light these up. The fish are distracted. Now's our chance. All true, but not easy. Earl's instinct was to turn around and find Granny, but he pushed the thought of it out of his head and pressed forward. The pallet clipped the curb and started to tip. Holly grabbed the shrink-wrapped tower of explosives and righted it, just enough to keep it on the jack, crooked but upright. She held onto the tower while Earl pushed the pallet jack onto the dock. The air filled with the thunk-thunk-thunk of wheels running across wooden planks, fast. They held on tight and ran faster and faster, building enough momentum to send the pallet jack off the end, out onto the frozen lake. They ran until their boots hit ice, and then they slid, 2 fat gingerbread cookies holding on tight to a careening pallet full of fireworks, over the lake, away from the shore. Earl's spirit soared. They'd done it. They had actually done it. They'd made it. The pallet hit an ice chunk about 30 feet out, went sideways, and the jack handle snatched right out of his hands. Holly screamed, "Light it up, Earl Frost! Now!" He dug in his costume, fishing for the lighter, but came up with nothing. "I can't find the lighter. I lost it." Holly stuck her hands inside his cookie costume. They moved up and down his body, desperate, searching. Her hands slid into Granny's snowman stretch pants and hit red satin panties. She stopped. She looked at Earl, eyes wide, expression unreadable. She pulled her hands out quick. Her cheeks were flushed pink. So were Earl's. He swallowed hard. "I can explain." She raised her hand. She held the lighter between her perfectly manicured bubblegum pink nails. She handed it to Earl without a word, and he scrambled over to the pile of fireworks. He tore into a box, flicked that bick, and lit every fuse he could see, cheeks still burning with humiliation. Any tiny chance he had left with Holly had just gone up in smoke, thanks to Bucky's red satin panties. Earl wished he were alive so he could kill him. The fuses fizzled and sparked, then spread like wildfire. Earl whirled around and grabbed Holly. "Run!" They did. Holly tried to look back, but Earl pulled her forward. Light exploded all around them, bright as the 4th of July. The air filled with cracks and booms. Sparks rained down. Heat seared their backsides. Hairline cracks formed in the ice. "Get off the ice!" Earl screamed. They ran as fast as their gingerbread legs would carry them toward that rickety wood pier, ice cracking under their feet with every step. If it broke, if they went under, they'd freeze, or worse. They closed in on the dock. Earl screamed, "Jump!" But Holly was already in the air, arcing toward the pier, arms and legs out, maneuvering that gingerbread man costume for extra lift like a flying squirrel. Earl wasn't as graceful. He jumped, but belly flopped and slid into the support post at the end of the pier. It knocked the wind out of him. Holly grabbed him, heaved him up onto the dock, right as the ice under him split open and a pair of claws came out slashing. There were more of those fish under the ice. Holly and Earl collapsed on the dock and held on tight, shielding each other from burning sparks raining down all around them. Holly whispered, "I sure hope this works." Earl whispered, "It did." A wall of fishmen, white scales glittering in the exploding light, waddled toward the water, blind eyes fixed on the fireworks. The creatures poured out of the town square, away from the houses and all the terrified families huddled inside, and lumbered toward Holiday Lake. The second the road cleared, Jethro kicked his truck into gear and sped off. Because the plan had worked, they had the fishmen's attention, and every one of them on land was lumbering back to the water. Unfortunately, they were heading straight for Holly and Earl. Chapter 15. The Importance of Being Granny. "I can't wait to hear the next part of the plan. You know, the part that gets us out of here," Holly said. About that. I thought we'd be able to run around them. I didn't think there'd be so many." May as well tell it to her straight. There was a white wall of fishmen in front of them, and more fish under the ice behind them. The creatures were literally everywhere. There was nowhere to run. "Are you shitting me?" Holly was not pleased. She raised Sparky. "Come on, we gotta go. Now!" "No!" Earl pushed Sparky's muzzle down. "We'll never get through." "Then what are we supposed to do? Let him rip us apart?" Earl grabbed the tiny speaker off her candy cane buttons and pressed it until Mariah shut up. "What are you doing? That's the only thing keeping them away," Holly snipped. Earl could see her stress. Her hair was out of sorts and her eyeliner smudged. She'd reached the limit of her bravery. We can't shoot through that many. Sparky isn't an AK-47. It takes too long to reload, he said. We have no choice but to stay really quiet and really still until they go back in the water. Then we can run. It's our best chance. He sounded calmer and more confident than he ever had in his life. He was terrified on the inside, but he didn't let on. Holly needed him to be strong. She needed him to have a plan, and he wanted to be the man Holly needed right now. You sure? She said. He nodded. Then he wrapped his arms around her and held on tight. They sat on that frozen boat dock, cleaving to each other, staying as still and quiet as possible, as the things slunk to the water and closed ranks around them. Pretty soon, Holly and Earl were surrounded by fish knees and butts on all sides. The fishmen didn't look down to see what they were bumping into as they lumbered toward the water. Their blind, watery eyes were fixed on the fireworks. At least that part of the plan had worked. Unfortunately, the fireworks didn't pop, fizzle, and spark for much longer. They died down, and the night fell dark and silent. The fishmen didn't move. They clicked, all of them. Click, click, wait. Click, click, wait. All the fishmen made the same sound in the same pattern, over and over, until the loud crack of ice splitting apart interrupted them. The crack was the sound of the lake swallowing the smoldering remains of the fireworks boxes in the hot pallet jack hole. It left a patch of open water twice its size in the ice. A handful of the fishmen lumbered up to this new stretch of open water and looked down in. But that was it. They didn't go in. They didn't go home. They looked up at the moon and parped instead. This was a new sound, like a miserable walrus. All the fishmen were silent for a moment, as if they were waiting. Then they all looked up at the moon and parped, the same sound at the same time. It was distinct, like a word, even though Earl knew that was impossible. Why won't they leave? Earl could hear her panicked heart beating double time through her gingerbread costume. I don't know, he whispered. Suddenly the sky flashed bright as day, and then a wave of intense burning heat rolled over them. The ice covering Holiday Lake cracked, and a wall of sharp, tiny bits of rocks, asphalt, dirt, bark cut through the air like a hurricane-force wind of rubble. The fish reeled and hissed, struggling to stay upright. Their heavily armored knees bumped into the faux gingerbread men huddled underfoot. Holly stifled a scream, and Earl moved, shielding her from the flying debris, holding her steady as tremors, and stumbling fish nearly shook them off the dock. He held on to her until the ground stopped shaking and the wind died down. The plant. Earl couldn't believe it. Jethro and Kyle with the Sea had actually done it. They'd blown up the fracking plant. When it was safe to look, Earl saw flames licking the trees on the far shore. Yep, the plant was out of commission, which meant that whatever it had done to drive the fishmen onto land was finished. They had no reason to stay now, but the creatures did stay. They looked up at the moon and parped again and again. Earl's guts sunk. These fish weren't leaving, which meant Earl's plan had failed, and if he didn't do something quick, he and Holly would be stuck out here all night, or worse, dead. New plan, follow me. Earl moved onto his hands and knees, maneuvering around the scaly white fish legs all around them. He motioned for Holly to do the same. She mouthed, Are you crazy? He mouthed back, Trust me. Earl crawled on his hands and knees slowly through any gap between the fishmen he could find, which was not many. Holly stayed right behind him, so close her gingerbread head kept bumping into his foam backside the whole way. The fishmen were distracted, so busy parping at the sky that they didn't care or notice that two fat foam gingerbread men scuttled past their knees. Earl and Holly crawled through the wall of fishmen and kept going until they broke free. Earl stayed on his hands and knees and crawled across the sidewalk up into the square. He looked back once just to make sure Holly was still behind him. She was. The two of them took cover behind Granny's wheelchair minivan. They collapsed against the tire, panting to catch their breath. That's the last time I'm ever trusting you. Holly punched Earl in the shoulder. Hard. From now on, you're going to tell me the whole plan before I do anything. I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. He rubbed his arm. That girl could hit. I know. I got to give you some credit. Plan or not, you got us this far. She leaned over and peeked around the van. Dang it. Why won't those stupid fish go home already? I wish I knew, Earl said. Suddenly, the music in the town square clicked off. There was a few seconds of static, then Mariah Carey poured from all the speakers. Thanks, Gloria. Better late than never, I guess, Holly huffed. What now, Earl Frost? We have to go back to Al's and regroup until we can come up with another plan, Earl said. Another plan? Holly huffed. We literally blew up a fracking plant. We set off a whole New Year's Eve worth of fireworks. What other plan could there possibly be? We can't go bigger or better. We can't top this. If this didn't work, we're done. It's over. It's not over. Earl didn't know if he believed that or if he needed to believe it. We just missed something, that's all. We just need time to figure it out. Fine. Holly huffed. Defeated, determined, resigned? Earl couldn't tell. She didn't seem to have much patience or enthusiasm left, and Earl understood. He really did. Hope was thin on the ground. But Earl hadn't given up yet. He couldn't. He grabbed Holly's gingerbread hand and pulled her up, and he led her through the square, moving quickly and quietly to Al's. The store was dark and quiet. Too quiet. Too empty. Earl's heart kicked up. Where are the grannies? They're supposed to be standing guard. He scanned the square. No grannies. And worse, no granny. Earl rounded Bobby's upturned truck, then froze. Granny's overturned wheelchair lay in a wide trail of red blood. Human blood. It looked like someone had been dragged, bleeding down the sidewalk. Granny's crocheted bag lay next to it, ammo spilled out everywhere. No! No! Earl's eyes darted back and forth, looking for a body. Oh, Earl, Holly said. Earl followed the blood. We can't! Holly pulled him toward Al's. We have to get inside. He shrugged her off and followed the blood, calling out, Granny! Granny! He was done whispering. He'd lost too much to these fish. He couldn't lose Granny, too. That was the limit. It would mean they'd taken everything from him. Holly stayed with him. There's nothing we can do for her now. If we stay out here, that's going to be our blood next. Earl didn't stop. He followed the trail, calling for Granny. His ears perked up on high alert, listening for a response, listening for her voice, however faint, listening for anything. He heard a raspy sound, barely a whisper. Do you hear that? All I hear is Mariah Carey, and I gotta be honest, that song is driving me crazy. If I ever meet her, we're gonna have words. Earl put a finger up to shush Holly. He didn't feel great about that, but he heard something. Something low, something faint, just below Mariah, ceaselessly squealing about Christmas. Earl followed the sound. He rounded a flower bed and stopped cold. Holly came up behind him. Oh my God, what is that? It was a fish, a really big one, like really, really big, 3 times the size of all the others at least. It was injured. It had a spear lodged deep in its side, but still it crawled, slow, dragging its gigantic body across the square toward the water, toward home. It stopped between heaves to click, but the sound was faint. This beast was hurt and fading fast. Jesus, Earl, look! Holly pointed to the thing's backside. The blood trail? That blood was Bucky's. The giant fish beast was hung up on his decapitated body. His torso was stuck to its underside and had been dragging his corpse along, squeezing the juice out of it as it moved. The giant thing looked at Earl with a huge blind white eye, then lifted its massive head and clicked. It was out of rhythm with the other fish. Oh my God. It hit Earl all at once. You hear that? Hear what? This one isn't calling out. It's answering, he said. We got it all wrong. They aren't a school of fish. They're a pod. Chapter 16. All I want for Christmas is you. What the hell does that mean? Speak English. Holly's voice was sharp from stress. It means they're smart. It means they have a social structure, Earl said. She's got to be their granny. She's the reason they're still here. They won't go home without her. Earl went in for a closer look. What are you doing? Stay away from it. Holly tried to pull him away. She couldn't. They must be like whales. Grannies lead the pod. They have years of accumulated knowledge. They know where the food is. They know where to hide from danger. Earl looked at the big fish with new eyes. It's fascinating. Did you know grandmas are rare in nature? A postmenopausal female is technically useless. You watch your mouth, Earl Frost, Holly said. That's not what I mean. I mean, if evolution's goal is reproduction, why does any creature live past its reproductive years? Earl said. But it happens all the time. Elephants, orcas, whales, humans. Having a grandma improves survival rates for the whole species. Look at me. My mama left. My daddy died. I wouldn't have made it without Granny. Humans take grannies for granted, but they're an evolutionary marvel. How do you know all this? Holly asked. Nature shows on TV? Guess I learned something useful after all, Earl said. All that clicking has got to be the fishmen calling for her. Listen. Holly and Earl both shut up and listened. The air filled with clicks and parps. And Mariah Carey, because was it even Christmas if she wasn't screeching in your ears? The fish were desperate enough to call louder than the music, and that was saying something. They parped, they clicked, calling out, and every time the giant fish granny lifted her head and called back. But she was too weak. There was no way her fellow fish could hear her diminished cries over all the noise. We have to get her to the water. Earl put his hand on the fish granny's back. Have you lost your mind? Don't touch it. We have to help her, he said. She's in pain. The fish granny raised her head. She looked back at Earl and licked the air like she was smelling him. She hissed but laid her head back down. She was too weak to fight. That or she was just desperate enough to let two land dwellers dressed as cookies give her a hand. Well, Holly's voice softened as she watched the injured creature struggle. Okay, but be careful. Earl ran his fingers gingerly around the spear lodged in Fish Granny's side. It was in deep, sunk between the scales. The end of it was coated in a crust of old coagulated green blood. Her scales were nearly dry. This isn't fresh. She's been out of the water for a long time. How's that possible? Wouldn't that kill her? Holly said. I don't understand why they all aren't dead, honestly. Some big fish can last until they dry out. It can take a while, Earl said. Why don't you melt some snow and pour it around her gills? It might help. Holly went to the nearest snow pile and started scooping. She rubbed snow between her hands until it melted, then let the water drop into the fish granny's face. The fish lapped it in, relieved. Holly said, Any idea who put that spear in her side? I don't know. Oh no. Earl broke out in a cold sweat. There was a label on the spear. The tiny print said, Property of Buck. The rest of the label was sunk deep into the fish granny, but Earl knew what it said. This was Bucky's precious replica Aliens vs. Predator prop spear. Bucky finally found a special enough occasion to warrant taking it out of the display case, just like his precious Kandarian demon dagger. I'm so stupid. I can't believe I was such an idiot. Earl buried his face in his gingerbread hands, and memories of the last few weeks flashed in his mind. Bucky walking into the gas and stop with that big white scale. The cult meetings, the flyers with the little drawings of fish monsters on them, the ritual, the sacrifice. Bucky knew the fishmen were real because Bucky had wounded and captured their leader. He wasn't just planning to win over the fish with a cult ritual and an Earl sacrifice. He had leverage. He'd taken it captive, and God only knew how long he kept her like this, out of the water in pain. Are you crying, Earl Frost? Suddenly, Holly's gingerbread arms wrapped around him. Come here. It's going to be all right. Earl sniffed up his tears. He didn't realize they were showing on the outside. Really, though, he wasn't sad. He was angry. At himself, yes, but mostly Bucky. This is all Bucky's fault, you asshole. Earl kicked the headless chunk of Bucky hung up under the fish granny's back leg. It was just like Bucky to run a scam and work an angle without caring who he hurt. I should have known. I could have stopped all this. Holly inserted herself between Earl and Bucky's stump of a dead body and put a very pointed index finger in his face. You listen here. We all do the best we can. There's no point in looking back wishing you could have done it differently. All we've got is now, she said. And right now, we got to get this fish back in the water before we all die. Right now, we've got to make Bucky's wrongs right. Holiday Lake needs you. Those fish people need you and I need you, so straighten up. Got it? She sounded like a stern school principal, and it worked. Earl stood up stick straight and wiped his tears. That's better, she said. So how are we going to do this? You put as much water on Grandma Fish as possible so she doesn't dry out and die? Earl said. Then maybe I should figure out how to move her to the water? And we should probably remove the spear? Holly dug her fists into the gingerbread hips. Are you asking me questions or telling me a plan? Telling you? Earl said it like he meant it this time, with a period at the end, not a question mark. Then why are you still standing there? Get moving. Holly shooed Earl off, then went back to melting snow onto the fish granny. That Holly, she was the kick in the butt Earl needed when he needed it. He moved through the square with renewed purpose, looking for a way to move a 1,000-pound fish. Bobby Ames' truck was out of commission. It was still hung up on the flower bed with a busted axle, and now the battery was dead. They'd never be able to lift a fish granny up into the bed anyway. The rest of the square didn't yield much. It was full of broken Christmas lights and decorations. The plan was starting to feel impossible. Then Earl tripped over Bucky's decapitated head and nearly fell on the bloody pile of chunks of Chester and his cousins Timmy and Daryl. A pair of sad green papier-mâché arms caught Earl before he hit the ground. When he looked up at the ugly papier-mâché face, Earl couldn't believe his good luck. Bucky's sad-ass creature from the Black Lagoon still sat on the old boat trailer. A huge black tarp, ripped, lay on the sidewalk behind it, along with the shredded remains of broken bungee cords. That tarp must have been covering Granny Fish. Bucky had brought her here on that trailer, which meant Earl could use it to get her to the water. Earl stepped into the alley behind the trailer looking for Bucky's 1983 GMC Vendura, but it wasn't there. They must have come here in Jethro's truck, and that was long gone. Granny's wheelchair minivan was mostly rust. It could barely hold up under its own weight, let alone haul anything. Damn it, Earl said. I can't win for losing. He went back to the trailer, grabbed the chains, hooked to the hitch, and pulled with all his might. And nothing happened. Okay, something happened. It budged, but the trailer only moved a couple of inches. It was heavy. There was no way Earl could move it once the fish granny was on it. His thighs and backside were already burning. He stopped to think for a second and heard tapping. He looked up. Artie Sweeney stared out at him from inside Al's. Earl went to the window. Artie, can you hear me? Artie nodded. I need something strong enough to move 1,000 pounds. Oh, and can you get me some antiseptic, a sewing kit, and some big bottles of water? Like really big. We need a lot of water out here. Can you help me? Artie Sweeney nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Earl filled with hope. They were on the cusp of a plan that was sure to work. Things were finally looking up. Click. Earl froze. That wasn't the click of a fish. It was a gun. Put your hands up and turn around, Sheriff Ed said. Earl did turn around. He put his hands up, too, because Sheriff Ed had his service revolver pointed right at him. Sheriff, listen, we need to get that big fish to the water ASAP. Please put down the gun, Earl said. That fish? Sheriff cocked his head. It's a monster. The only place it needs to go is straight to hell. You, Blondie, put your hands up and move next to your boyfriend. Stay where I can see you. Sheriff Ed motioned Holly over. She had no choice but to put her hands up and scoot in next to Earl. Ed, please, you don't understand, Holly said. Oh, I understand. I know exactly what's going on, Sheriff Ed said. I'm on to you, Earl. First the flyers, and now you're trying to patch up the big one? You did this. You brought these things here. This is all your fault. I didn't, I swear, Earl said. Sip it. I don't want to hear another word. You've always hated Christmas. You've never fit in, but I always thought you were a good kid. Weird, but good, Sheriff Ed said. Well, you fooled me once, but you won't fool me again. You're trying to destroy Holiday Lake. You're trying to destroy Christmas. You're a terrorist, and you're going down. Sheriff Ed pulled the cuffs off his belt, and Earl's guts churned when he saw the glint of silver in the moonlight. If he ended up in cuffs, Holiday Lake was doomed. Earl was sweating bullets. Only thing I gotta know is, how did you do it, huh? How'd you get those things to obey you? How'd you get... Sheriff's eyes went wide, and then he fell on top of Holly, knocked out cold. Granny sat in an Al's shopping cart. She'd clocked Sheriff Ed with the butt of her shotgun. She was sitting on bottles of rubbing alcohol, swabs, bandages, and jugs of water. Lots and lots of water. They were piled up all around her, and Artie Sweeney was driving the cart. Earl had to blink back the tears. I saw the wheelchair and the blood, and I thought, It's okay, son, Granny said. That thing clipped my chair and tipped me over on its way to the shore, but I'm fine. We can hug it out later. Right now we've got bigger fish to fry, literally. What are you planning to do with all this? She pointed at the stuff in the cart. We've got a new plan, Earl said. This one's going to work. I just know it. Chapter 17. I'll be home for Fishmas. Earl Frost had never sewn up a fish wound before, but he read about fish surgery on the Fanciers Forum, and he'd watched a couple videos online, and now he hoped that was enough. Granny sat in an Al's shopping cart, pouring bottled water on the fish Granny's face and gills. Artie Sweeney poured water over her body. Holly laid out the sewing kit, then put her hands next to Earl's on Bucky's spear. They prepared to yank. You ready? Earl looked at Holly. They were both shaking. As I'll ever be. All right, on 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. Granny Fish tensed, then collapsed back onto the pavement, exhausted. She could have taken all their heads off with one slash of her giant claws, but she was smart. She knew they were trying to help. Earl threw the spear into the bushes, and when he turned around, Holly handed him a bottle of peroxide. He squirted it onto the wound, doing his best to disinfect it. Use the whole bottle just to be safe. She picked up a bottle of rubbing alcohol and swished a sewing needle around in it while Earl finished. How do you always know just what to do? Earl said. Manicuring isn't all polish and glitter. We disinfect a lot, she said. I've been thinking, maybe I should do the stitching. I won a ribbon for my 4-H Sew Fun project back in the day. That was a long time ago, but you don't look like you sew much. No offense, sugar. I can't sew at all. It'd definitely be better for the fish if you did it. Earl was relieved. Holly put on rubber gloves and threaded the needle. Earl moved in next to Fish Granny and gently spread apart the scales, revealing the deep gash in the skin underneath. Holly got in there and didn't hesitate. Her hands moved, confident and fast, but gentle. She sewed that Fish Granny up in no time. The creature's flesh was surprisingly soft. Guess that's why they needed such thick armor. When Holly finished, she squeezed some peroxide on the stitches, let it fizz, and emptied a whole tube of antibacterial goop on the wound. Holly rubbed it around gently with her gloved index finger. Then Earl let go of the scales and they closed over the wound. And that was it. It was done. That's the best we can do for her. Let's hope it's enough. Holly pulled off her rubber gloves with a stretchy slap. Now, how are we going to move her? She's too big to lift, and we can't pull Bucky's trailer. Everyone's cars are parked on the street. We can't risk going down there. She pointed at the fishmen, still lined up on the shore, parping and clicking. They grew more agitated and desperate by the minute. The Mariah on all the speakers wouldn't hold them back for much longer. I got it covered. Al rolled up with an empty pallet jack. It had extra long forks and was bigger than the one the fireworks were on. If you roll her to the side a bit, we can get this under her. It's rated for up to 2,000 pounds. This one got brakes? Earl asked. Better ones, Al said. In my defense, the fireworks usually only go as far as the display by the cash register. All right, let's do it, Earl said. A few folks were brave enough to come out of Al's to help move Fish Granny onto the pallet jack. Ted and Fred in their matching red union suits, Darlene Stump, old Mr. Hanson, the Zitty kid from Sporting Goods, and all the grannies in the Misty Pines Thursday night knitting club. Everyone lined up next to the injured beast, ready to heave-ho. You sure about this, Earl? Darlene asked. She knows we're trying to help, Earl said. They looked at Earl, then at each other, then moved in next to the Fish Granny. Matty Pickens and the mayor, still in his hockey pads, poked their heads out of City Hall when they saw the crowd gathering. What's going on? Matty Pickens asked, but went white as a sheet when she saw the big old fish. We've got a new plan. Can you give us a hand? Earl said. Tell Gloria to stay inside. I need her to work that sound system one more time. Matty nodded and came out to help, even though she was coated in a cold sweat from the terror. So did the mayor, but Earl suspected it was only because he couldn't chicken out in front of his voters. He was going to have enough problems waiting on his desk Monday morning. The wrecked town square, the burning fracking plant. He didn't need to add being the chicken who ran from the monsters to the list. Everyone lined up and put their hands on the Fish Granny. Al moved the pallet jack into position. Hold on, Earl whispered to the beast. She clicked and laid her head down. Ready? Push! Everyone pushed. Al slid the pallet jack into the gap between the scales and the sidewalk. Then everyone retreated, putting plenty of space between them and the fish. But the job was done. Granny Fish was loaded up and ready to go. Now what? Artie Sweeney said. Now I'm going to take her down there. Earl pointed to the wall of irritated fishmen by the water. Just make sure Gloria turns off the music when I give the signal. We need complete silence. You sure about this? Holly squeezed his arm. There's no other way. Earl couldn't just send Fish Granny rolling. She'd gain speed, fly out of control. If she crashed and got injured or died, the fishmen would rip Holiday Lake to shreds. Someone has to make sure she arrives safe. You hide at Al's until it's done, because if this doesn't work, I'm all out of ideas. Holly wrapped her arms around Earl and squeezed so tight his head felt like it was going to pop off. You come back safe, you hear me? I will try my best. You can count on that, he said. You better, because I've got plans for that face of yours. Holly kissed his cheek, which burned hot with desire under her lips. Earl pushed the impure thoughts away. He needed to stay focused, now more than ever. He turned to the pallet jack and fiddled with it to get a feel for it. Then he went to Granny and hugged her. "You're shaking, son," she said. "I'm not sure I can do this," he said. "This is your moment. You have to rise to the occasion," she said. "You always know what to say. How are you always so calm in a crisis?" "Unfortunately, it's a learned skill. I've had a lot of practice," Granny said. "Now promise me you'll come back safe in one piece." "I'll try my best." "Better get on with it then," Granny said. "Yeah, I better." Earl turned to Mattie Pickens and the mayor. "You two keep your eyes on me. When I give the signal, have Gloria turn off the music. We need it so quiet those things can hear a pin drop. Got it?" "We got it," Mattie said. Everyone else retreated to the safety of Al's, even Holly, who blew Earl a lucky kiss before she went inside. "All right, it's time to get you home," Earl said to the fish granny. Then he grabbed the jack handle and steered her toward the lake, slow and steady. He didn't look back. He didn't want to think about all the people counting on him. He didn't want to think about what was at stake or what would happen if he messed this up. He didn't look ahead either, because he'd want to run away, because he had to be nuts to be walking toward an army of angry fishmen who could cut his head off with one swat. He put one foot in front of the other and dealt with whatever obstacle was immediately in front of him. He focused on navigating the maze of broken things between him and the lake. He focused on pushing the granny fish slow and steady toward the shore. He focused on keeping her from rolling too fast, even though his muscles ached. He moved, and after what felt like hours, Earl made it to Main Street. He wheeled the fish granny to the wall of fishmen, and they didn't see him or her, not yet. Their heads were tilted up at the sky as they called out to their granny, which was good. Everything was going according to plan. By the time Earl moved Fish Granny into place and Gloria shut off the music, Earl would be halfway back to Al's. Earl quietly lined the pallet jack up with the boat launch by the dock, where the sidewalk sloped down into an icy concrete ramp. The rest of the shore was rocky, so this would be the easiest place for her to get back in the water. He moved her as close to it as he could without the other fish noticing. He patted the fish granny, and she raised her head to look at him. Well, as much as a blind creature can look. And he whispered, "Here you go, Granny. Your kids should be able to take you from here." Earl backed away. Then he jumped up and down and waved his arms. This was the signal. Gloria would turn off the music any second now. Earl's job was finished, so he turned to go. Hi-ya! Bub Varney came out of nowhere. He had a blinking plastic knockoff lightsaber, the tag said Fight Light, over his head. He aimed it at the fish granny and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Run, Earl! I'll cover you! I'll slay the beast!" "Bub, no!" Earl grabbed the blinking sword. "Give it to me! Turn it off now!" Bub Varney was oddly strong for an old guy, and he wouldn't let go. "Run, Earl! Tell Gloria I love her and I would have married her if things had turned out different. Tell her I did this for her." "Shut up and give me the damn light, Bub." Earl yanked, but Bub turned and spun like a real Jedi, and the light slipped out of Earl's hands. "I'm saving you. Why are you so salty?" Bub said. "You are not saving me. You're messing everything up. The plan has changed." Earl grabbed that sword one more time and yanked, desperate, and Bub finally let go. Not because Earl was skilled at taking weapons from old men, but because Bub had frozen solid with fear. He stood still, like a Bub popsicle, staring at something. Earl turned around. Every fisheye in the place was looking at Bub's blinking fight light. And worse, the fishmen were coming at them. "Damn it, Bub!" A big white claw came down on Bub, and red blood spurted into the air. "No!" Earl threw that blinking fight light at the attacking fishman and grabbed Bub. He wrapped his arms around the old man, picked him up, and ran. Claws cut air all around them, slicing open Earl's gingerbread suit. He carried Bub to the snowbank on the other side of Main Street. He laid him down and checked his wounds. Earl looked back. The creatures were distracted. They had that fight light surrounded, and they were clawing it down to blinking made-in-China shreds. Bub was white as a ghost, but he was old with liver spots, so Earl couldn't tell if that was normal